For me, the hardest part of being a nurse has always been seeing my patients suffering from pain, especially when there's little I can do to ease it for them. It comes from what I consider to be my empathetic nature. That's why I wanted to become a nurse in the first place, so that I could shoulder some of their burdens and take that pain off their hands through my aid. I always knew that my patient's agony would hurt me, emotionally at least, but I never thought that it could literally kill me. And yet, that's what happened to so many that I knew on that fateful shift. I'd been working in a local hospital in my city, one with a fairly great reputation and resources. St. Mary's Hospital had been somewhere I'd wanted to work at when I was doing my placements, and I fit in so well there. As someone who thrives working under pressure and comforting people in hard situations, I was typically rostered in the hospital's ICU. You might think it would be overwhelming, but it never was for me. Not until the day I met Brendan. My long shift was just starting when a new patient was assigned to me. The patient's doctor, Dr. Harrison, led me to him while explaining his situation. It was all fairly standard. A young college student who had been unexpectedly struck by a car while crossing the road, with multiple broken bones throughout his entire body. He was still being checked for internal damage after several days' admission, but was otherwise healthy and expected to make a full recovery. I got on well with Dr. Harrison, so his calm explanation about the patient put me at ease. In fact, I felt relieved to be working with this patient, viewing him as a break from the usual insanity of sepsis and organ failures. Entering his hospital room, I saw that most of Brendan was in a full body cast, although his head and torso were unbandaged. The poor guy had clearly caught the full brunt of the speeding car that had hit him. Thankfully, his notes told me that he was being sedated with codeine, so at least he wouldn't be in much pain. I glanced over his charts before approaching his bedside, patient IDing him and introducing myself. "Hi Brandon, my name is Eileen, and I'm gonna be your nurse for the next few days," I told him warmly. Brandon looked like your typical college-aged guy, with a mop of messy brown hair, a youthful face, and some facial scruff. He greeted me with a sincere smile, but his green eyes were filled with worry. I wanted to put him at ease. For the next several minutes, we made friendly conversation, with me asking about where he went to college and what he studied as I went about assessing his bandages. Then came the time for me to assess his pain level. "Brandon, I want you to tell me how much pain you're in right now on a scale from 1 to 10, I told him. Gently, I pointed to a chart on the wall with 6 smiley faces on it, ranging from a white smiling one to a blank-faced one to a deeply frowning one. The colors ranged too. The happier faces were moss and green, the neutral faces yellow and orange, and the miserable faces red and crimson. I explained to him how each face corresponded to pain levels. 0 meant no pain, 1 and 2 meant mild pain, 3 and 4 meant moderate pain, 5 and 6 meant severe pain, 7 and 8 meant very severe pain, 9 meant excruciating pain, and 10 meant the worst pain possible. He hesitated in thought for a moment before answering. 5, he said with a knot against his pillow. That made sense for his level of injuries. Widespread but stable bone breaks with codeine for pain relief. He seemed to be managing the pain fine, it seemed. However, what he said next took me completely off guard. "Look, Eileen, I don't want to be a burden," he said grimly, fixing my eyes with a serious stare. "But I have to warn you, no matter what, my pain level cannot reach 10 on that chart. If it does, it'll be fatal." I was taken aback by this comment. In the past, I had some patients that were prone to dramatic statements, and others that were deeply frightened. I was used to this. But Brendan had seemed to be level-headed and at peace with his injuries. He'd casually talk to me about his economics course and how long he'd be away from it. He hadn't seemed like someone that was terrified of dying. "Oh honey, don't worry. We're gonna take good care of you," I reassured him with a smile. "Your injuries certainly aren't life-threatening to you." To this, he just looked up at me solemnly, his face framed, surrounded by his casted limbs. "I'm not saying it will be life-threatening to me. If my pain level gets to level 10, everyone around me is going to die." My face went blank. I furrowed my eyes quizzically at this statement. How much codeine was this kid on right now? I know it sounds crazy, but it's been that way ever since I was a baby. He pressed on despite my confusion. Whenever I was in intense pain, if I fell on the playground, skinned my knee riding a bike, or burned my mouth on hot food, it would happen. Someone random in a 30-foot radius to me would die. I continued listening, trying to note his facial expression. He didn't look like he was hallucinating. He looked like he was recalling devastating real memories. Sometimes it would be a stranger. More often than not, it would be someone I knew. They were more likely to be around me. It always came in the form of heart attacks. The first time it happened, it was my cousin Casey at my house. There were other relatives, neighbors, schoolmates. The longer and stronger my pain was, the more people died. My pain would probably spike to 7 or 8 on those occasions. He murmured. Those few seconds were all it took to kill people. Tears started to well up in the corners of his eyes, despite composed demeanor. I spent my whole damn life trying to be as safe as possible. Got my flu shots, never played sports, rugged up in winter, barely left my room. I did everything I could, and still got hit by a drunk driver and wound up in a full body cast. Brandon turned from his reverie back to face me. His tearful expression was pleading. "You seem really nice. You're doing really important work to help people. I don't want my power. I don't want to hurt you." I decided that I'd let the poor, clearly delirious kid go on for long enough. I calmly assured him that everything would be okay and made a note to have him checked for head trauma from the accident. The day went on and I continued with my rounds, thinking little of the obviously imagined story he'd told me. Until I came back to double-check his medical records and add my own notes to them. His file was unusually long. Apparently, his family had had a high incidence of cardiac arrests throughout his life. A grandparent here, an aunt there, a sibling too. And there was his cousin Casey, the first person to exhibit his heart condition. Now my interest was piqued. His school records were also on file, and they had the same occurrences. Classmates of his had died of heart attacks around him, and he had been investigated for potentially instigating them through violence or pranks. Brandon's history really was peppered with strange deaths, as he'd said it was. Could he have been telling the truth? Again, I shook it off. While completing my rounds, I reminded myself that I had to remain logical and sound in order to do my job. I couldn't start believing in crazy superstitions and cursed powers of death. By the time I returned to Brandon, I could see that he was in a state of even more distress and agitation. I pointed to the chart and asked him again to relay what pain level he was in. It was a 7 now, severe pain. The codeine must have worn off, or it wasn't properly working anymore. "That's levels enough for people to start dying," he fretted. "Oh God, after years, it's gonna happen again." I wanted to calm him down. I was going to, but before I could, I heard an alarm sound from across the hospital floor. One of the other patients in the ICU was coding at this very moment, and staff were needed right now. So I let Brendan know that I would be right back and dotted out of his room to the scene of the upheaval. Just one door down from where Brendan was, a patient had just flatlined out of nowhere. I watched as doctors tried in vain to revive him, but Mr. Levante was gone. Discussing it with my fellow nurse, Arya, as they called the time of death, I couldn't help but note the strangeness of it. The patient had been recovering from stomach surgery and was just in the hospital for post-operative care. There was no reason he should have died then, and of a heart attack too. Arya adjusted her blonde bangs and reminded me that this was the ICU, and these things weren't unexpected. She had no idea of the absurd, death-bringing tale I'd been told earlier. Then, just as suddenly as before, another patient died across the hallway. This time, it was someone who had been in the process of being discharged to another unit after already recovering from their illness. I didn't need another coincidence to convince me this time. I raced back to Brandon's hospital room and began to administer to him the codeine that I'd picked up along the way. He gulped down the tablets as fast as he could, not even pausing for me to get him water. He hadn't been due for his next dose for 2 hours, but I didn't care. I'd eat any reprimands the nurse in charge gave me. All that mattered was that I alleviate Brandon's pain and stop the deaths. It did the trick. Slowly, Brandon's demeanor relaxed as the pain relief washed over him. No further deaths followed in the passing minutes. I looked at Brandon with a look of shared, bleak understanding. His story finally rang true to me. The rest of my shift would have to be conducted with that in mind. The pain had been coming from Brandon's damaged limbs, so I made sure to be extremely careful whenever I tended to them. Changing his bandages, doing wound care, and conducting neurovascular checks periodically over the following 12 hours. It was all done with the gentlest, most delicate level of care. Any pinches or rips of pain could send his pain levels soaring again, and I had 2 examples of what would happen if that occurred. I could be the next one. How had they even gotten him into the hospital without paramedics dying en masse? The answer quickly became clear. Brandon would have been knocked unconscious during the initial accident. By the time he came to, his pain had been stabilized and medicated. God knows if any bystanders passed away at the scene from heart attacks too. Against all odds, I reached the end of my shift without any incident. I'd been so preoccupied with Brandon and his codeine that I barely paid attention to any of my other patients. Taking care of Brandon was taking care of them, but I'd kept the hospital alive that day without a bloodbath. Or so I thought. I had just said goodnight to Brandon and was headed into the elevator when Dr. Harrison pulled me into a conversation. He wanted to discuss my care of Brandon, or at least that's where I think he was going with the conversation. "So Eileen, before you go," probed Dr. Harrison, "I was meaning to check with you about one of your patients. Is it true that—" Mid-sentence, he dropped to the ground in front of me, clutching his chest. I knelt down to assist him, shrieking for help, but a few seconds later, he was dead. Another heart attack. Responding to my cries, a hospital orderly began racing towards us to assist when he too dropped dead, gripping his chest. My exhausted mind whirled over the long 12-hour shift, organizing my thoughts into order. Then realization. Brandon. Something's happened to Brandon. Single-mindedly, I leapt up from Dr. Harrison's still body and began racing to Brandon's hospital room. The chain reaction of deaths was happening faster now. On the way, I passed the concerned wife of a patient asking what had happened to the 2 dead men near the front desk. She went down before I could even shout a response her way. The heart attack killed her as fast as the others. I sprinted past the hospital visitor. Brandon's curse didn't discriminate. I burst through the door into Brandon's room and was met by the cataclysmic sight of him face down on the floor, his casted limbs immobile, save for him writhing in pain and moaning into the floor. On the table across the room was a stray codeine pill. He had been reaching for the pain relief pill I had foolishly dropped in my haste. In the process, he'd fallen out of his bed and, dear Lord, potentially rebroken every broken bone in his body. With a voice of haunted terror, I began to ask him the dreaded question. "Brennan, what's your pain level?" I didn't need to finish asking. I realized he had been moaning a word this entire time again and again. 9, 9, 9. His pain was now very severe, the kind of pain that made speaking near impossible. "Oh God, it's rising to 10. This shook me out of my panicked stupor. If his pain level reached 10, everyone in a 30-meter radius, every soul on this hospital floor would die. I had to act now. I rushed over to haul him back onto the bed, but quickly realized this would almost certainly cause his pain level to jump, which meant certain death for everyone. The same followed for trying to knock him out with force. Codeine was only a moderate opioid. He was gonna need something stronger. He was gonna need morphine. Determined, I set about grabbing the morphine drip and setting it up while the screams of hospital chaos echoed in the background. I had just got the back onto the stand when Arya's head poked around the corner of the door frame. "Eileen, my God, I need your help over here," Arya cried. "One of my patients has just gone into cardiac arrest, and why are you administering morphine to a patient on the floor?" Arya was adamant that I come assist with the domino of flatlining patients and staff alike. She triaged the situation and insisted I leave the non-dying teenager. How was she to know that he was the reason for all the death, that my actions were trying to stop it? Ultimately, I didn't need to convince her. My friend keeled over dead seconds later too, right before my eyes. In fight or flight mode now, I worked the IV drip into moaning Brandon's arm. I located a vein in his wrist and inserted the needle, keenly aware that I could be the next one to go like my colleagues had. At last, though, the morphine started to flow. I held Brandon, grief-stricken, and felt his pain lessen and lessen. Alongside it, my panic lessened. Soon, Brandon had passed out into sweet unconsciousness, parting with his unbearable pain. The death toll from that deadly day came to 9 people in total. 4 staff, 3 patients, and 2 visitors. It was the same number as Brandon's maximum pain. St. Mary's Hospital explained the tragedy as a mass panic chain reaction, triggering a series of undiagnosed arrhythmias. Even though it didn't make sense, there was no better explanation. Way more would have died if not for my actions, but they'd never believe that. I still wonder if it was really luck that kept me alive, or if it was Brandon's fondness of me that protected me from his effect. Regardless, for the guilt I feel for not acting faster, my emotional pain is at a 10. It is because of this that I've dedicated myself to staying on as Brandon's nurse for the duration of his recovery. My responsibility will remain to keep his pain levels out of the red via care and medication, ensuring there's no future deaths. It's a bumpy road ahead, however. He begins physiotherapy tomorrow. Those who celebrate Father's Day usually have a fun story or two to share about a bonding moment. I've been meaning to write here for some time, but needed to get into the new rhythm with my family. A lot has happened these past few weeks, but I'll never be able to see my father in the same light again. My family and I have been pretty insular from the outside world as far back as one could expect. My great-grandfather moved our family to the outskirts of nowhere, Wisconsin, to live out the family business of trapping and hunting. We've stayed in the same remote area ever since. It wasn't much, but it gave us enough food and income to sustain ourselves. Folks around here don't trust much of the world outside the Great Woods and have come to trust our neighbors instead. You'd think in such a remote part of the world, you'd be pretty close with your family. Well, you'd be wrong. All my life, my father went into the woods surrounding our pasture, hunting for game. It didn't matter what he'd be after. Deer, elk, pheasant, even black bear. Any excess meat or hide we'd sell to local markets or trade with neighbors. Despite this, hunting kept my father away for most of my life. He missed every important period of my life. My mother gave birth alone in the hospital while he hunted in the woods with my older brother, Rhett. Wasn't there for my first steps. Never helped me with schoolwork. Little League baseball games, a no-show. He didn't even bother coming to my graduation earlier this year. The only semblance of a father-son dynamic was he'd come home each night and give me a hug. No words, just a 10-second embrace and occasionally a kiss on the forehead. He'd always smell weird, like old grass, dirt, and body odor. I could see the lifeless, ragged look in his eyes from a long day. His absence would be worth it if he actually knew how to hunt. Despite how long the family has been in the hunting game, I've never seen him bring a single prize. No deer, no elk, not even small game like rabbits or squirrels. Was he just messing around in there? I knew he was in those woods because I would hear his rifle constantly. Even in the dead of night, I'd hear the piercing roars of his Winchester 94 off in the distance once every few hours. I used to think he must have seen something in those if he fired off a few times every 7 or 8 hours or so. Dad and my older brother, Rhett, never took me on their hunting trips. They always told me I wasn't ready, despite practicing with a rifle since I was strong enough to hold one as a 6-year-old. I was good too. The purposeful distance never helped them. Thankfully, Rhett was a much better hunter than Dad. Most days, Dad and Rhett would venture into the woods together like clockwork. But it would never be Dad to make the kill. Rhett always brought in the big game and supported us financially. In the evenings, I'd help Rhett out with skinning, processing, and packaging the meat. Rhett and his wife, Jess, recently moved back into our home. Rhett was 30 and was preparing to be a dad of his own. Jess was in her 3rd trimester, and while Rhett was working his ass off to be a provider, our dad was always out in those woods, wasting the days away from his family. Rhett and Dad often took shifts so that one might have an opportunity to rest. It was difficult not to be resentful, even with his occasional evening hugs. Those don't make up for lost time. I recall one night when I was 16 talking to Rhett about Dad's disappearance. We didn't talk much about our feelings, but what's an older sibling meant for, if nothing else? Rhett? I mumbled. Why does Dad not want to be around me? I recall Rhett pausing his hands, looking down pensively at the young elk hide he'd been cleaning since noon. He does want to be around. Dad does love us. He really does. He just... Rhett exhaled sharply. It's not my place to say. Not yet. Just know he is doing everything he can for us. For you. He and I both do. You'll understand when you're older. Rhett hugged me close once he saw how watery my eyes were from frustration. I didn't know at the time, but Rhett was right. Even if he seemed non-existent, he was out there doing the best he could. I know they say it's the thought that counts, but it would have been nice to be near him more growing up. Everything changed about a month ago when I turned 18. I had just graduated high school and was still considering what to do with my life. I initially wanted to join the family business and hunt alongside my brother, but if I couldn't join in, maybe go off to community college, make a name for myself, make Dad proud that I become something other than some Voyager wannabe in the Midwest. Last month, in the early morning while Rhett was out in the woods hunting, Dad came into my room. Time to get up, Will. Get dressed. There's something I need to show you. I got up groggily, waking up with another head full of messy brown hair. What do you want? I'm not in the mood today. My dad sat at the foot of my bed. I know it's been hard. It's difficult for me to explain, but there's a reason I'm always off in those woods. I think you're old enough now to understand better. Just know that whatever you're about to see, I've done it for you. Rhett's been pushing me to take you out into those woods earlier, but he knows my reasons for waiting. Happy birthday, son. It's time I took you hunting and taught you our family business. Great. Finally 18, and my first gift from my father was work. Something felt off though. Dad always seemed wary, but never disinvested into my own personal life. I grabbed my jacket, brown cargo pants, boots, and got out the door. For the first time ever, I went hunting with my dad. Our trek into the big woods took over an hour. Pine trees loomed over us, blocking out the sun as we ventured further and further out into the woods. It was pretty barren, and we never ran into or saw any animals worth shooting. Eventually, we reached a tall deer stand used for hunting with elevated range. The tower stood several meters off the ground, standing solidly in place by the massive iron poles and wire anchoring the structure to the earth below. The windows were covered by camouflage blinds, blending the box-like structure into the spring foliage around it. The only way into it was a shabby wooden ladder. It was a bad time to admit to my dad that I was afraid of heights, but I wasn't about to blow my one chance. Entering the hunting stand, I was sat amazed. Hundreds of pictures lined the walls inside the room, some recent, most old. Family pictures. Looking closer, I realized that they were pictures of important moments of my life. Pictures of me as an infant, me wearing an oversized Little League uniform before my first game. Pictures of me in bed, sleeping as a toddler. My first bath, church events, all with me front and center. Mom and Red were in them too, but it was clear that I was the focus of this collage. Dad, what is all this? He looked at me, smiling softly. Well, I know I haven't been around too much. Not spending time with you, not seeing you crawl as a baby, not being there for your first steps, seeing you grow. It was heartbreaking. All I want to do is protect you. But... He paused, a voice cracking. There can only be 2 hunters at a time for this thing, and I didn't want to subject you to what I've had to do these past 18 years. I'm getting older, and I want to spend time with you, the real you, and I can't keep doing this forever. It's time for you to take over. Dad, what are you? I was interrupted by a hollow cracking noise coming from the woods. It sounded far, like a dead tree falling down, only there was no loud crash, just more cracking. Hold that thought, son. Let's get this done quickly. I've fixed the rifle at its head. I need you to see what I've been hunting all these years. I shimmied over towards the rifle. It was postured with a metal rest, fixed towards a dark region out into the woods. Looking through the scope, my heart dropped. Far off into the woods was a gangly figure, splayed out across the forest floor, a body without a head. Its old-timey clothes made it stand out like a sore thumb in these woods. Whoever this was, they wore corduroy pants, an ivory-colored shirt buttoned all the way up, and a dark gray, withered suit jacket one might see in a production of Oliver Twist. I jolted backwards, twisting my head so fast it almost gave me whiplash. Jesus, Dad, what the fuck is that? It's not what it looks like, son. Look closer. What do you see? In horror of the fact my dad could be a murderer, I turned back around through the scope. He was right. Looking closer at its arms, it seemed human-shaped, but I've never seen forearms extend that far past a man's knees. Its middle finger was noticeably longer than the others, all 7 of them. Its knees were off too, not inverted like a dog or bird. Its knees were splayed perpendicular to its torso. Strangely enough, its corduroy pants seemed to be tailored specifically for whoever or whatever this was. The cracking noise persisted. It took me a minute, but it was apparent that the shifting sounds were emanating from the mysterious corpse. What exactly am I looking at? Son, the rifle should be aimed directly at its head. No matter what you see, I need you to pull the trigger. Waiting too long will only put us in danger. What? Dad? Please, what's going on? I don't... The body shook viciously, its hitless frame spasming on the forest floor, crunching with each jerky motion. Now, Will, the second you see its eyes, pull the trigger. I grabbed the rifle, trusting the man I once barely knew in a situation I barely understood. Peering through the scope, I saw what he meant. The top of its skull was slowly reforming. It would be inaccurate to say it was regenerating, like a lizard growing its tail. Instead, the bloodied mud and earth beneath its wound seemed to slither towards the headless corpse's neck, forming first into an oblong shape and morphing slowly into what resembled a skull. A human skull. Do you see its eyes, Will? I could feel my heart pounding, watching whatever this thing was slowly creeping its way back to life. Its massive middle finger began twitching, whipping backwards towards its forearm like a scorpion's tail. Its chest began lifting up, breathing, its ribs piercing the white shirt it wore. At long last, the hit had returned. Its long neck seemed to struggle, lifting its head up slowly. I've seen freaky monsters in comic book and movies, so I was expecting the worst, bracing for whatever this beast was. Its face shot right up while reclining. Dark blue eyes met mine. It spotted me instantly, as though it knew exactly where I was. There was something familiar about its gaze though. Looking closer, I realized it had my face, down to every minute detail. What the fuck? Now, Will, yelled my dad, sitting right beside me with his binoculars. Take the shot, now! The not me's face bellowed out a hollow noise, like a broken siren, its voice piercing my brain, though it spoke no words. Its arms slowly dragged up, bracing itself to stand up. I pulled the trigger. The bellowing stopped. I closed my eyes while pulling that trigger, but there was no mistake. Its head was blown clean off. There was a minute of silence between my dad and I. Dad broke the silence first. Good shot, son. We spent several hours up in that box. He explained everything that night. Whatever that thing was, it had been following our family for generations. Dad thinks it's an alien. Our great-grandfather called it a doppelganger. Whatever it was, it used the visage of the youngest man in our family. If left unattended, it would slink closer to whoever's face it wore. It never reached any of our family members because each and every day, 2 members of our family would go out and hunt it down. Its body barely took any damage aside from the head. It took time to regenerate, but would always regenerate. This is what my father had been hunting all these years. Hunting the not me for the entire course of my life. It was difficult, you know. My dad began. When you were born was one of the happiest days of my life. I chuckled. More than when Rat was born? He laughed. Don't get too cocky. Before Rat, that thing wore my face. Imagine trying to kill yourself over and over again. Thankfully, my father, your granddaddy, took most of that burden. When Rat came into our lives, that beast changed. I don't know where its clothes came from, but its face always shifts into the youngest. It expects you to protect it, or at least neglect from attacking it. I don't know what it wants with us. All I know is that now it's after you. I turned back towards the body of the beast. Its body laid motionless, but I could see its splattered blood from across the trees slowly slither back toward the ground in the direction of its husk. When you were born, Dad continued, it took your face, your infant face. I came out here each night, taking that thing down over and over again. Seeing your chubby infant face through that scope was like hell. Pulling the trigger was worse. I cried every day, knowing that it was like killing my son over and over again. That's why I have your pictures around constantly, to know what I'm really protecting, and to remind myself of the fantastic life you have. I may not be around much, but I'm proud of the man you've become. The beast out there is hollow, lifeless. It just imitates you, but it could never be you. I couldn't live with myself if that thing ever took you out of our lives, or worse, try to take the life you have for itself. I regret the time I spent not being near you, but it was worth it to preserve the man you've become, and the son I love so much. I hope you can forgive me. Of course I forgave him. I mean, the poor bastard has been killing forest demons for decades now. Who wouldn't feel bad for the guy? We both spent several minutes tearing up, sharing our feelings while splitting a pack of Coors Banquet. He shared his excitement to start golfing as a pastime. He also shared his concerns for the future. Back when I was young, the beast would grow its head back once every 2 days or so. Nowadays, it's at least 3 times a day. It grows faster based on how old the person it personifies is. I was hesitant to start hunting this thing down each day, but I was happy that we got to hang out more. While he'd be around, he shared with Red and me that it was time for him to retire. There can only be 2 hunters at a time, boys. He constantly harped at us. Apparently, I had an uncle at some point who tagged along with Dad and our grandfather as a third wheel. It didn't end well for him. When I'm not busy hunting, I get to hang out with my dad. Now that he's around the house more, we've gotten to catch up on a lot of lost time. Turns out he's a massive Red Wings fan just like me. We even got tickets to a few of their games for next year. It was confirmed that while Dad enjoys his retirement, Red would take over as the main hunter for the beasts in the woods, while I took over Red's job as the primary provider for the family's hunting business. Red went into those woods 3 times a day just like Dad. It's been somewhat of a seamless process, albeit unnerving, knowing my brother was blowing my brains out across the forest floor each day. Things will be different now though. Just this morning, Red's wife went into labor. They had a happy, healthy baby boy with dark blue eyes, a short nose, and dark brown eyebrows. A face that Red would soon grow uncomfortably familiar with.
I have seen and killed real evil. I'm not talking about people. Well, I've killed plenty of them too. But no man compares to real evil. No man is capable of the same atrocities and chaos that real evil inflicts. I hunted giants during my first deployment to Afghanistan, and they are the epitome of evil. I'm a US Army Ranger. I've been serving in BAT for 12 years, and I've seen and killed the scariest shit imaginable. I haven't told anyone for fear of what would happen to me and my family. I lay awake most nights, wishing I could tell my wife what I've encountered. My mind and soul breaking from the weight I have to carry. I relive the horrors every night when I go to sleep. I've kept it all to myself, until I found no sleep. I recognized many of the stories posted by my brothers in the Spec Ops and military communities and realized I finally had an outlet. I've checked in on some of the posters to confirm they're still breathing. I guess the government assumes that no sleep is fake, so they don't monitor it. What I'm about to share with you is real. You deserve to know what lies in the shadows. You deserve to know what they're hiding from you. And you deserve to know about the men and women that have sacrificed their lives to keep the forces of evil at bay. Skip the next few paragraphs if you are knowledgeable of the Spec Ops community. It's important that you have a basic understanding before I get to the crazy shit. I promise you that the stories that follow will be worth the wait. Army Rangers are a Tier 2 Spec Ops unit, along with the Green Berets, SEALs, Marine Force Recon, and MARSOC. Tier 1 consists of CAG, Dev Crew, and numerous groups that I won't speak about. We're often joined by Tier 1 groups from around the world, which are usually the SAS and Joint Task Force too. Tier 2 consists of the top 0.1% of the military. Tier 1 generally only recruits the best from Tier 2. We all train for years for selection and qualification schools. We all possess top secret security clearances. We're all very good at killing. And we all will forfeit our freedom or our lives if we share what we have done. Our government utilizes Spec Op units because we work in secret. We are the best, we're well funded, and we can deploy anywhere in the world without congressional approval. You'll be shocked by how many countries that we're currently serving in. Our track record is impeccable, but usually close to the public. I'm 34, a major, and have been serving in BAT for the past 12 years. I'm from Kansas City and a Mizzou grad. I'm currently attending a military school at Fort Leavenworth while I work on my PhD from Kansas State and await my next deployment to some hellhole. The good news is that I have plenty of time to share my experiences before I head back out. My first encounter with real evil happened during my first deployment to Afghanistan. It was 2009. I remember checking the computers in Kuwait while awaiting a C-130 to take me to Bagram. I was excited the Chiefs had just signed Matt Castle, thinking we'd be headed to the Super Bowl soon. Anything to get my mind off of what awaited me. Death, paralysis, loss of limbs. I was 24, just a year out of college, and didn't even have a serious girlfriend. I had a lot to live for. I pushed it out of my mind, leaning on the fact that I'd be leading the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. My Rangers would get it done, and I would make my BAT and Rangers proud. I flew into Bagram at 2200 hours with a couple dozen other soldiers, wearing our bulletproof vests and Kevlar helmets. The C-130 was dark, only the dim green lights illuminating the inside. Those around me glowed like an alien green. The pilot gave us a warning to strap in as he began his descent, circling over the airfield and shooting flares to ensure no RPGs could hit us on the way down. Some fobbit whimpered and cried in the corner, while an NCO making contact with me yelled at the soldier to stop being a bitch as he rolled his eyes with a small grin. The ramp lowered, slamming hard on the cement runway with a loud metallic crack. I grabbed my gear and head out into the dark. A huge staff sergeant yelled, "LT, get your shit and follow me." Staff Sergeant Vasquez, 6'5" and built like a brick shithouse, shaved head, looking like the Hispanic version of The Rock. He led me to the hooch in the Spec Ops gated community on base. It was a storage container, which had 3 sleeping quarters divided by plywood. He told me to throw my gear on and head to the Tactical Operations Center. The commander had a mission for me. I stood in the TOC in full gear, M4 hanging from my sling and Glock in a leg holster, looking at the dozens of TV screens and soldiers monitoring radios. The room was full of chatter. Too much chatter. Something big was going on. My commander, Lieutenant Colonel Williams, introduced himself, telling me I was in the big leagues now, shut the fuck up and do exactly what Captain Stone said. He then ushered me into a side room. I looked around and realized this wasn't going to be a normal mission. Staff Sergeant Vasquez sat at a table with 8 others, their sleeves bare, no ranger scrolls. I realized it was an 8-man team of Green Berets. My commander started his brief. Team 329 went missing approximately 4 hours ago in a desolate portion of the LSA mountains. Their last transmission came in broken. They were escorting a CIA operative to a cave high in the mountains. We haven't been told anything else. We're sending in Team 357 for search and rescue. LT, you and Vasquez are tagging along. Your platoon is on mission for another few days, so you're going to get some experience learning from Captain Stone and his team. The intel officer stepped in and provided as much details as he could for the mission, while my commander pulled me out of the room. LT, we don't know what the fuck is going on. The CIA are being shitbags as usual. They left the teams and us in the dark. I want you and Vasquez to gather as much intel as possible while you're there. These fuckers are getting our guys killed, and we don't know what for. I met Captain Stone and his team at their vehicles, 3 Humvees that had been stripped down. They basically looked like dune buggies with miniguns mounted on top. Captain Stone looked me in the eyes. He had a steely resolve, but there was worry behind his eyes. He raised his hands above his head and said, "LT, aim high." I responded, "Roger sir, hit shots," gathering that he meant the enemy had body armor on. He looked at me again, fiercely serious, and fully extended his arm above his head. "No, aim high." I nodded and we all loaded into the vehicles. Is he saying they'll hit us from the top of the cave? I remember thinking. I pushed it from my mind as we took off. We left Bagram still pitch black, wearing NVGs as we rode through the hot desert night. I was constantly scanning the perimeter, waiting to be ambushed on the roads. I looked back at the huge, bearded team guys. They were all looking straight ahead. They all seemed to know something that I didn't. They had zero concern for the road and seemed to be a million miles away in their minds. It was as if the real threat far exceeded what we had seen from the Hajis en route. We hit the LSA mountains a couple hours later, pulling into a small combat outpost and dismounting. "Ammo, grenades, water, and NVGs," is all that Captain Stone said. I grabbed my assault pack as one of the team guys tossed me a few grenades and extra mags. We stepped off from the command outpost, moving up the mountain in a wedge formation. I remember thinking we were invincible as I looked at the huge warriors carrying M4s, SCARs, M2 sniper rifles, and grenade launchers. These guys had probably taken down entire Al-Qaeda units by themselves. They had the look, the one you earn from taking the lives of other men. I felt like I was superhuman. Little did I know what awaited us. We came upon the cave just as the sun was cresting the mountain. The sky was blood red as the darkness faded into oblivion. The cave looked like the mouth of a giant serpent. The opening was on the other side of a sheer ledge that stood 10 to 15 feet high. As we approached, Captain Stone said, "Eyes up, keep your distance." As we got within 100 meters of the cave, I saw something shiny on the ground. I signaled for the squad to halt and called Captain Stone over. It was a radio. The mic had been ripped off and the radio had a massive dent. Dried black blood caked the side of it. Chunks of skin and tissue littered the area. Captain Stone said, "Shit, James," as his face turned to anger. He stood up as one of the team guys pulled out some climbing gear. He fastened it and we all climbed the ropes as silently as we could. I was last to climb, cresting the ledge and seeing the squad in prone, pointing their weapons at the cave opening. As soon as I was up, the squad stood and started to move slowly towards the cave. E, one of the team guys, took point and took a few steps toward the cave. I was overcome with the worst smell imaginable, like sulfur, shit, and rotten milk. I began to get an intense feeling of despair and hopelessness. It wasn't the adrenaline rush and heightened senses of a normal engagement. It felt evil. Just as E put his hand up to motion for us to stop, I heard the deepest, loudest roar emanate from the cave. It sounded like a cross between a man yelling and the roar of a lion, but blended in an impossible manner. Before we knew it, something huge came charging out of the cave and impaled E with a massive spear, lifting him 15 feet off of the ground. I looked in amazement at what looked like a huge man. It was absolutely massive, standing 13 to 14 feet tall, its shoulders as wide as I am tall. It had long red hair and a shaggy red beard. It had a loincloth on and leather sacks on its feet. We were all momentarily frozen. There was an absolute sense of pure unbridled evil that emanated from this thing. Finally, Captain Stone yelled, "Hit shots!" We all unleashed a barrage of rounds into its head and face. 9 soldiers, all emptying 2 to 3 magazines worth of ammo into the beast. It dropped E, who was still skewered on the spear, and began to charge me, the ground shaking with every step. It looked at me with such cruelty and disdain, open mouth revealing 2 rows of giant teeth. I felt like an ant that was about to be stomped on by a child. It yelled something in another language that I didn't understand, its voice splitting my eardrums. As it reached out its massive hand to grab me, it finally fell. Riddled with bullets, its head and face caved in. Captain Stone empties another magazine of 7.62 in the giant's head before going to check on E's body. It took 3 of us to lift the spear and another 2 to pull E's body off of the spear shaft, which makes a sucking noise as we pull him off. The spear had ripped out his entire chest cavity. His ribs were splintered and sticking straight out, like crooked, jagged teeth. All of his internal organs lay in a pile on the desert floor. The 5 of us covered in his warm, sticky blood. Captain Stone called in the sit rep and requested transport. We all sat down for what seemed like an eternity of silence. Normally, after a mission, we joke around and tell the most inappropriate stories. It's tradition and makes the horror of war feel a little more acceptable. Today was different. Every eye was glazed over. Everyone sat, facing away from the giant. We had seen, felt real evil. This thing was not a man. Being in its presence brought a feeling of hopelessness that I can't begin to describe. It was like all of the joy, hope, and good had been sucked out of the world, replaced by despair and agony. We finally stood up and examined the beast. It had 6 fingers on each hand. Its hands were large enough to wrap around my torso. Its mouth revealed 2 rows of teeth, with each teeth being the length of my finger. The hair on its head and beard was an unnatural shade of red. I wrapped my hands around one of its fingers in an attempt to lift its arm. I couldn't even get its hand off of the ground. The spear, still dripping with blood, weighed as much as the logs we use in training that require 6 men to lift above our heads. We stepped into the cave, seeing hundreds of human bones. Chunks of skin, tissue, and military uniforms littered the pile. In the corner were hundreds of weapons. Modern guns like M4s and FALs, rusted out AK-47s, and ancient, rotting swords, spears, and shields. It's like it was keeping trophies. An unmarked Chinook showed up 15 minutes later. A bunch of spooks walked out. One said, "Grab the Neff." "Fucking clowns! Thanks for the intel!" the team sergeant yelled. The agents never made eye contact. They unloaded a forklift and cargo net, wrapping up the beast and loading him into the Chinook. Captain Stone motioned for me to come over. I asked if he was doing his closure report. He said, "No, wait for it." Shortly after, one of the agents walked over and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a pre-filled closure report detailing how we had been ambushed by Al-Qaeda. E had been killed before we scared them off. He said, "Sign here." Captain Stone signed and motioned for me to do the same. With a threatening look, the agent said, "You can never speak of this." He turned to walk away, and I asked, "What's a Neff?" He paused momentarily, then walked off. When we returned to backroom, we did a full debrief. Some spook sat in the corner the entire time to ensure we didn't speak about the giant. After the brief, my commander told me to shower and meet him at the smoke pit in 20 minutes. "Ditch your electronics." Lieutenant Colonel Williams handed me a cigar as I approached the smoke pit. He asked me what I had actually seen on mission, and then explained to me that 6 other teams had encountered this giant. Most were less lucky than we were. He informed me that he was trying to figure out what the hell they were. And he did, eventually. But that's a story for another day. My first engagement with the giant set off a chain of events that brought me to the truth of those evil beings. After the mission was over, I was approached by one of the team guys. He removed his hat to reveal a kippah underneath. "Sir, do you want to know what that thing said to you when it charged?" he asked. I nodded without hesitation. It said, "Son of Yeshua, I will eat your soul." He then looked me in the eye and said, "We've killed dozens of these things. We're figuring out what they are, and it's not good. Head out with us on mission tomorrow, and I'll fill you in." I think the evil hiding in the dark has always existed. It seems like they've come forward in recent decades. Maybe it's technology and the explosion of population. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe they've been unleashed. Said E. What I'm about to share is 100% true and a vital part of the fight against the Neph and other creatures. You deserve to know that there are elements within the government that are fighting for you. You also deserve to know that elements within the government are working against you. Will you be ready to fight? Day 2, Afghanistan, 2009. I dreamt the most vivid and lucid dream the night after we killed the beast. I was dead, standing in some unnatural place. It was pitch black, stretching for an eternity. The only light in this place emanated from my body. I felt like I was floating, like my body did not physically exist. I ran in every direction, screaming for help, never seeing another soul or light. I finally gave up, sitting down, ready to spend eternity in isolation. I suddenly began to sense the same fear and despair that I felt in the presence of the giant we had killed. Please, God, no, I thought. On cue. The giant walked out of the darkness. It looked the same, but its eyes were now yellow with red pupils. It bent down to look me in the eyes, licking its lips and giving me a look of disgust.
You sent me to this place, you and your filthy god. Now that you're here, I will make you pay for eternity,
it said, as its hands was inches from snatching me up. I saw a flash of light dart between us. I shot upward, hearing the beast yell a guttural cry of agony. I was suddenly back in my bed, drenched in sweat, feeling like I had just gone somewhere I should not have been. Vasquez, asleep in the other room, awoke to the sound of freedom being delivered at Mach 2. The shipping container I'm in rattles so hard that my gear falls off the hooks on the wall. Bagram is one of 2 main US coalition air bases in Afghanistan, so jets and bombers take off at all hours of the night. "Son of a bitch, shut the hell up," Staff Sergeant Vasquez yells, as he throws something at the ceiling, leaning over a plywood wall, smiling and stroking my hair. "Wake up, young one." I threaten to bash his skull in, knowing full well he can snap me like a twig. He laughs and slowly lowers below the plywood. The sun is barely up and the temperature is already in the mid-90s. My fire-resistant ACUs make it feel 20 degrees hotter. I squint, keeping my eyes down to avoid the rising sun while putting my Oakleys on. In the daylight, it becomes apparent that I stick out like a sore thumb. Everyone around me wears whatever they want. Most have baseball caps on and have beards. Some have uniforms on with no identifying patches. Some wear cargo pants and polos. I'm one of the few in ACUs. My bat scroll on my left arm, clean shaven and short hair. Rangers are one of the few spec op units that wear uniforms and abide by shaving and hair length standards. I'm 24 and a second lieutenant. The gold bar on my chest might as well be a bullseye. Being a second lieutenant in BAT is like being a freshman that is captain of the varsity football team. I technically outrank the enlisted soldiers and NCOs, but I lean heavily on them for mentorship. I prepare myself for the daily hazing rituals, knowing I better be ready to laugh at myself. I step into the talk to check in with Lieutenant Colonel Williams, who is leaning over a soldier, staring at a computer screen that is showing troop movements. Activity in the talk is much slower today. Most soldiers stand behind screens, dipping or drinking coffee. Some are talking about football, others look like zombies in need of a break. The place feels different than the night before. I wonder how much they actually know about what happened the previous night. They couldn't know, or they wouldn't be at peace. There's no going back from what I saw. It was weighing on me heavily. Lieutenant Colonel Williams interrupts my thoughts, nodding at me and motioning for me to follow him. He is tall, 6'4", thin, with graying hair on his temples. He looks like he probably runs marathons, but has a slight limp. Word is that he had lost most of his right calf in an IED attack. He still walks so fast that I had to power walk to keep up. He pulls me into the conference room and tells me to sit down. Lieutenant, Captain Stone told me you did a great job last night, and that I can trust you. The way he said, "trust you," led me to believe there was more behind what he was saying. I'm giving first platoon to another lieutenant that is en route. I started to object, but he holds his hands up to stop me. This is not a punishment. You'll get a platoon eventually. For now, you're taking over the PSD team, and you'll augment some of the team guys while they're recovering from the last few months. He gives me a look of reassurance that lets me know there is more to this. I thank him and accept my fate. He tells me to get unpacked and settled, and that he'll find me for my next mission. He hands me a phone, saying, "It's secure. Well, it's secure from the Hajis." I wonder what he means by secure from the Hajis. I didn't understand who else we needed secure comms from at the time. I leave the talk dejected. PSD are the three letters that most don't want to hear when deployed. PSD stands for Personnel Security Detachment. It's the military's less fancy version of what you see the Secret Service doing on TV. It's a great job when you're in garrison. I've planned and led the security for multiple presidents and even for the Queen of England during visits throughout the West. But while deployed, I want a platoon. I want to be the blunt instrument, not the bulletproof vest. I couldn't shake the feeling I got from him though. He was trying to tell me something, and telling me I was augmenting team guys was really strange. That's not typically something an officer would do. We're leaders and managers, not extra guns. Also, team guys normally don't get augmented unless something catastrophic happens. The next month went by in a blur, as I spent 16 hours a day escorting general officers and high-ranking politicians around Afghanistan. I sat in on meetings that decided the fate of the nation. I fought through a couple of attacks on our principals, narrowly missed a VB-IED, and even took a round to the arm. None of it seemed to matter though. It wasn't even exciting. I spent most days thinking about what that giant was, and thinking that I should be hunting the real evil of this world. It's like the Neph left a scar on my soul. I couldn't shake it from my thoughts. And where the hell was David in 357? He said he would talk to me about the giants they killed. But I haven't seen them since my first night in country. Then, something happened that changed my life. Forever. A few guys walk into my office. Two of the guys look completely out of place. They have khakis and black polos on that say CBTI. Both are a bit plump. They aren't CIA operatives and clearly aren't soldiers. The third is a spook. He has on cargo pants, a black polo, and a black cap. He has the look. Spooks stick out like a sore thumb. The spook shakes my hand and takes his cap and sunglasses off, introducing himself as Jake. He looks like a legitimately good guy. He has balding gray hair, is about 5'10", and has the friendliest smile you'll ever see. He looks like everyone's favorite uncle. He isn't being distant and isn't talking to me like I'm retarded. A far cry from the CIA asshats that I had interacted with thus far. He looks me in the eye and says, "Mike, I'm going to be needing you and Vasquez for the next couple of months to run security for an operation we have going on." It's jarring to hear my first name. As far as I know, only Lieutenant Colonel Williams is aware that my name is Mike. I try to hide my angst and ask, "What for, sir? What's the mission? I need to run it by Lieutenant Colonel Williams since we're the only dedicated SOCOM PSD team in the area." "Absolutely, run it by your boss, but it's already been settled. He's aware," he says. He's avoiding my question about the mission. "What's the mission entail? I've got a 10-man team, so I need specifics to allocate the proper number of personnel," I said. Jake responded, "Just you and Vasquez. These gentlemen will fill you in on the mission." He gets up and gives me a very nerdy fist bump, smiling, and says, "I'll see you boys at 1900. Meet me at the helipads. We're going to be working nights." He then walks out of the talk without glancing back. The other two guys fill us in on the basics. We're going to be dropping orbs around the country to test out a new technology we developed. I know at that point to stop asking questions. I'm not going to get anything from them. They leave the talk and Vasquez gives me a funny look. Who the hell were those two? I ask. Jake is clearly a spook, but those two look like they work at my uncle's engineering firm. Vasquez filled me in on CIA contractors. The three-letter agencies hire a lot of civilians for technology development, implementation, and intelligence gathering. CIA contractors are much more rampant than you realize. If you have worked at a major engineering firm or technology provider to the DoD, then you've worked with or for someone that has been contracted by the CIA at some point. You've clearly picked up the distrust between the Spec Ops community and CIA. It's not always that way. There are a lot of great CIA agents that try to take care of us. The problem is that the majority of joint CIA Spec Ops missions leave one side wanting for intel, and that's always the Spec Ops side. We're generally treated like blunt instruments, whose only value is to hammer the nail. I would distrust them, even if they hadn't fucked us over by failing to inform us of the giant. Our missions and core beliefs are just vastly different. The Spec Ops community works in the shadows to eliminate threats to the United States and our allies. We can't publicly share what we do, but we have zero interest in misleading the general public. I don't want you to have to worry about the evil people and creatures of this world. But honestly, I would like for that to be your choice. When dealing with the Nefs, there were good and bad elements within the CIA. It just took us a while to see which side most were on. I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Williams, who confirmed what Jake said. Vasquez and I were tasked out to Jake and his team for the next couple of months. he said something strange as I was leaving the talk. LT, Jake is one of the good guys. Trust him entirely and ensure he comes back in one piece. I step out into the bright sun, throwing my patrol cap and Oakleys on. I stare off into space, thinking about what he said. Why would he tell me a CIA agent is one of the good guys, and to trust him entirely? Aren't we all on the same team? The CIA can be dicks, but they're still on our side, right? I meet Jake on the helipad at 1900. The sun is starting to go down. I recognize the gunner. He was in the 160th helicopter that picked us up after we killed the giant. He nods at me as we board the Blackhawk. The rotors push us upward, the helicopter rocking forward a bit as we lift it to a few hundred feet in seconds, the nose stabilizing as we speed forward. There is always something comforting about riding in Blackhawks. For some reason, I get a better rush from leaning out the door than I do jumping out of a plane. It doesn't hurt that the 160th has the best pilots in the world. My pilot, John, is a warrant officer 3 and an artist in the sky. We shoot forward, flying nap of the earth, 200 miles per hour, just above the tree line. I clip a carabiner to my belt and pants, leaning out the door, feeling like I could reach down and touch the top of the trees. We sneak in and out of the canyons, helicopter pitch black, as John flies only aided by knots. We travel for about an hour as I hear Jake say, "Right here, put it down above that cave." We step out of the bird, Vasquez and I sprinting in opposite directions, diving into the prone and facing the tree line. One of the engineers pulls a small robot out that looks like the kind you see bomb squads use in the States. Using a remote control, he wheels it down the cave opening. It's carrying a large crate of small orbs that look like they are full of wiring. The robot returns and we all load the Blackhawk, flying up into the brisk mountain air. Periodically, the engineers drop loads of orbs off the side of the Blackhawk. No one speaks the entire trip. They just monitor their computers, which Vasquez and I aren't allowed to view. This happened every night for the next couple of months. For 12 hours, we headed out over the countryside, dropping orbs and sending the robot into caves. I had no idea what the hell was going on. Vasquez and I were frustrated because we were wasting valuable time in country staring the tops of trees and pulling security for a robot. Most nights, we didn't even return to Bagroom. We landed at some desolate FOB, leaving from there the following night. Jake would smoke cigars with me after missions. He would talk about his family back home, or about how he joined the CIA to protect America and reveal the truth. Truth with a capital T, he would say. He had a necklace, a crucifix with rosary beads that was always wrapped around his wrist. He constantly fidgeted with the crucifix between his fingers. It was like he was always nervous of some unseen force. He would talk to me about my high school, which made me supremely uncomfortable at first, because no one knew where I had gone. It was a private Christian high school in Missouri. He'd talk to me about how I played football and basketball there. We'd have philosophical debates about Christianity, since he was Catholic and I was Protestant. Always respectful and always interesting. I'm not sure when it happened, but he became like an uncle to me. At the end of our conversations, he would always pause and look me in the eye. He wanted to tell me something about the mission, but just couldn't do it. One night, once we were nearly complete with the mission, he came to my hooch late at night. It must have been 0200. The only activity in the COP was soldiers pulling security in the towers and fighting positions. He tells me to ditch my electronics and rubs some sort of wand over me like security in an airport. We then walked outside the COP, which makes me highly uncomfortable. We aren't exactly in Missouri. He walks over to a shallow cavern and drops a few of the orbs we had been leaving around the country. I watch as a small green light comes on each one. They suddenly roll forward, spacing out and coming to a rest at opposite ends of the cavern. Sitting on a rock, he pulls out his laptop and motions for me to look. It was the cavern we were sitting in. It was like staring at a 300-degree picture online. The cavern was completely mapped out. He moves the joystick, steering his way around the cavern. I could see in great detail the granite walls and even the small bugs that were flying around, frozen in mid-air. It finally dawns on me as I look at him. Holy shit, we've been mapping the caves of Afghanistan. Yep, it's not perfect. Some of the deeper caverns have dark spots, but it's a start. My team thinks we've covered about 30% of the cave systems, he says. I'm blown away. This is going to be huge. Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban. We're going to make some major progress in the war on terror. He looks at me and raises his hand above his head, just like Captain Stone had before battling the giant. Think bigger, he says, grabbing his computer and heading back to camp. The next morning, Jake grabs Vasquez and me, telling us we're going to see a friend. We borrow a vehicle from the Kiwis responsible for the area, driving into a tiny village a couple of hours from the COP. Jake dismounts, motioning for us to follow him into a small home. An elderly Afghan man, long white beard, head wrap on, smiles, saying something in Dari. Jake gives him a hug and responds. We sit down at a table full of traditional Afghan foods. We spend an hour with small talk, Jake translating the entire time. The Afghan elder finally says, "You have new friends. You want me to tell them about the beast?" Jake nods, looking at me. Asadi is the elder of this village and a dear friend of mine. He led me on the path I'm on. He introduced me to the giants when I was about your age, he says. Asadi begins his story, Jake translating. My village has always feared the beast. We have always feared the night. We all go inside when the sun sets, even pulling our animals into our homes. He motions toward a goat that is standing outside. The beast has always done what it wanted. No man could stop it. When I was a young man, I thought the elders were just trying to scare us. I had never seen the beast. So, two of my friends and I went to explore the countryside at night. It felt very freeing to no longer fear the stories of my elders. We explored for hours, enjoying the cool air of the night. The grass was wet with dew as we ran up and down the hills near our village. His facial expression changes to sadness. We are at the top of one of the Forbidden Hills when we were overcome with a terrible smell. We were all frozen in fear. We feel it in here, he points at his chest. Suddenly, a very large man, like two of us, grabs one of my friends. My friend screams in pain and fear, the beast crushing him, his bones loudly popping. The creature then bites down on my friend, ripping his body in half. He chews the top half, loud cracking with every bite. He swallows and drops his legs on the ground. The beast looks at me, speaking in a language I do not understand. The only word I recognize is my name. It then grabs my other friend, smashing him flat on the ground, blood pooling underneath. The giant stands over me and yells like a lion. It then grabs what's left of my friends and walks off, chewing on one of their legs as it goes. The elder is crying at this point. He says, "I waited every night for the beast to come back for me. Some years we heard nothing of it. Some years entire families disappeared from their homes. We always felt the ground shaking and heard the roar like a lion. Every time I heard my name yelled between the splintering and cracking of homes being destroyed, I was always too afraid to reveal myself. I can still hear the crunching of my friend in its mouth." He then looks at Jake with a small smile. "Until Jake and other Americans found and killed the beast many years ago. I've slept soundly for many years now." We thank Asadi for the food and give him gifts. Jake gives him a hug and says the Pashto word for friend as we leave. We head back to the COP, not saying a word. All I could think of was the giant's yellow eyes. My heart pounding with rage for the innocent people of Asadi's village. The next morning, Jake informs me that we're done mapping for now. He puts his arm around me and walks me around the corner of the sleeping quarters. "Mike, I've enjoyed our talks. I informed Lieutenant Colonel Williams that you and Vasquez did an awesome job, and that I trust you entirely." He reaches out and slides something in the breast pocket of my ACUs, saying, "Go see Lieutenant Colonel Williams before closing the Velcro. John will take you to him. Lieutenant Colonel Williams has a new mission for you. Welcome to M." I must have looked extremely confused. He smiles and gives me one of his patented nerdy fist bumps and walks off. We descend toward a COP in the most remote part of Afghanistan. Jagged mountains litter the landscape, snow covering the peaks. The Black Ox dips sharply as we pass through two peaks and into a small clearing, landing within the walls of a COP. I had just spent the last couple of months flying all around Afghanistan. I never saw this COP or these peaks. I had no idea where we were. It was placed in the most counterintuitive fashion possible. It was at the base of a hidden pass, sheer cliffs all around. There were only a few pilots I knew that would risk landing in a place like that. And we were low on the ground. An enemy ambush would leave us defenseless. The rotor slowly winds down as we step out of the chopper. David is there to meet me. He has a huge smile on his face, which is weird for team guys. His patrol cap off, only his kippa covering his head. "Welcome to FOB Exodus," he says, nodding at the helicopter and door gunner. He grabs my bag from me and ushers Staff Sergeant Vasquez and I toward the TOC, which looks like every other shitty TOC in a desolate outpost. Maps and TV screens littering the walls, soldiers sitting at tables, monitoring radios. The odd part is that two huge team guys stand in the back of the TOC, each at the low, ready with weapons. "All good, guys," David says. They push the shelf to the side. It makes a loud, grinding noise as it begrudgingly slides across the floor. Where the shelf used to be is the staircase. "I hope you're ready to be tortured," David says, with a smile. He motions for us to follow, leading us to a door at the bottom of the stairs. He knocks 3 times and waits for a voice to call him in. I follow him into a large conference room with a huge table in the middle. Lieutenant Colonel Williams stands in front of a TV screen, conducting some sort of intel brief. A dozen guys sit at the table. I recognize Captain Jones, a few team guys, and a CIA agent from backroom. There were a few SAS officers, 2 Brits and an Aussie. a Canadian GTF-2 NCO, and an Afghan commando. On the end sat an Israeli commando, who I would later learn served in CRA. The wall has TV screens, dry erase boards, and corkboards. All are littered with pictures of creatures. Most look like the giant we killed, labeled Nephilim or Rephaim. Other terrifying creatures litter the wall. There are maps with red tracks signifying targets. One corkboard has pictures of what look like angels and Greek gods. It's labeled Watchers or Fallen Angels. Staff Sergeant Vasquez takes a seat at the table, winking at me and smiling. Lieutenant Colonel Williams says, "Welcome back, Vasquez." He turns to me and says, "Welcome to Task Force M. We decided we can trust you entirely. Are you ready to kill real evil?" I was pulled out of class today, which is highly unusual since the general officers don't even interrupt coursework. Some guy in a suit talked to me and said he wanted to meet me face to face. It was a really weird interaction. The guy had a creepy, sleazy vibe. He wasn't a CIA operative and definitely wasn't a soldier. He never introduced himself and never said why he was talking to me. I think we all know why though. I'll try to get the rest of the stories up over the next week or two. Save them if you want to keep them for reference. There is a possibility that they'll disappear at some point. It won't be by my doing. This part is David's first interaction with a Neph. It was using them like a war club. I swear to God. Then, it started to eat them. J. Afghanistan, 2009. Moments after Part 2. Part 3 is David's first interaction with a Neph. "Whose turn is it?" Lieutenant Colonel Williams says, looking around the massive conference room, fixing his gaze on me. "LT, I know you must have some questions. We'll get to them soon." David moves to the front of the room, snapping to attention. "I think it's me, sir." Lieutenant Colonel Williams tells him to stop being a smartass and to get started. David smiles and begins his story. "There I was, just a young sergeant. It was the summer of 2001. I was on Team 177. They were much cooler than my current teammates. You know, since we were MFF. The room boos as Captain Stone throws an empty can of Rip It at David's head. He continues with a smile. These guys were true warriors. I was pretty sure they would find Bin Laden by themselves. I was just a young sergeant, first team. I was in awe. I was invincible. He looks at me with understanding. Anyway, we had been rolling out of missions for about 6 months. Afghanistan was the Wild West. Limited FOBs and resupply was a bitch. We were all over the south running reconnaissance. He uses his fingers to make quotations. We were in and out of Kandahar, which was absolutely overrun by Taliban fighters. Every recon turned into a tactical retreat. Well, after we dropped about 1 million pounds of ordnance. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, until the Hajis moved into the caves. We killed a lot of evil sons of bitches. The weird part was, it took them months to move into the caves. It was like they were afraid to go underground, even with predators and B-Force bombing them back to the Stone Age. They just stayed out in the open. Afghans aren't stupid. They come from a long lineage of fighters. They've been fighting for 2,000 years. They stopped Alexander the Great in his tracks. The Soviet Union got sick of fighting these fuckers. But it was like they lost all tactical bearing. It took them months to move everyone on the ground, and we didn't understand why. One day, we received a mission to reconnoiter a cave system east of Kandahar. We were told that some Taliban high-value target was operating a cell in a system of caverns. Air support was unable to penetrate far enough underground to flush them out. We step off from a COP, traveling only at night. Iran hadn't snuck many NVGs to the terrorist cells at that time, so we were able to move unimpeded. We followed the Arghandab River for a few days, setting up a patrol base a few clicks from the cave, sending 2 3-man teams out to establish LPOPs, monitoring the movement in and out of the cave. One of the LPOP teams comes back one night, sprinting into the patrol base, muttering, "Rangers," the running password. David looks at me and says, "Don't get any ideas, it wasn't you, Slackjaws. It was the baseball team," he said with a grin. He pauses to collect his thoughts, and starts again, looking back at the room. So, the 3-man team runs into the patrol base. They look like they've just seen a ghost. Jay, one of the Bravos, says, It was fucking eating them." He is breathing heavily and panicked. "What are you talking about? Calm down," I ask. Jay takes a few deep breaths and throws some dip in his bottom lip, then starts again. "For 48 hours, we watched Hajis, armed with AKs and RPGs, go in and out of the cave. There must have been 50 total. A few hours ago, the cave suddenly sounds like it's the 4th of fucking July. We see the Hajis sprinting out of the cave, screaming, stumbling over each other, scared to death, man. Suddenly, there is a loud roar. I swear to God, I felt the ground shake as the thing moved." He paused to spit. "This thing, it comes out of the cave, and it's just annihilating the Hajis. It must have been 3 times their size. It's ripping through them like butter. It sideswipes a group of them with its arm, knocking them against the wall. It grabs a Haji in each hand and squeezes. Their bodies explode, hits popping from the force. I swear, I could hear their bones break from our position 200 meters away. It grabs one of the fighters, their RPG shooting straight up, snaking off into the distance. It uses the man as a fucking war club. I swear to God, it smashes the fighter's body against a half a dozen men before biting him in half and swallowing. The 10 Hajis that were left sprinted out of the cave and into the forests. I'm pretty sure they're still running." Captain Holmes, the team captain, looks Jay in the eyes, waiting for him to say it was all a joke. Nothing. Jay stares back at us, eyes completely glazed over. The other 2 witnesses nod in unison to confirm Jay's story. Captain Holmes stands up, walking away with his radio, speaking to Hire, who inform us to maintain our current position and wait for direction. A couple hours later, Captain Holmes informs us that we're heading to the cave. We're to kill anyone and anything in there. Jay, completely out of character, yells at the captain. "Are you fucking serious? It took down 50 men like it was killing ants." Captain Holmes nods understandingly, only saying, "We leave in 20. David pauses, like he's catching something in his throat, and starts again. We leave our trucks at the patrol base, camouflaging them the best we can, then head out into the darkness. We walk, using our knots, because it's fucking pitch black on the mountain. A green haze replaces the darkness. The trees and fallen logs look like shadows. The entire movement, all I can think about, is becoming food for some unknown beast. NVGs and the lack of sleep makes me hallucinate the entire trip. Everyone in the room nods, because we've all been there. Every fucking tree looks like a huge creature. Every branch looks like an arm reaching for me. We walk down the mountain, Jay leading us to the other LPOP team's position. We find nothing but blood, weapons and casings. I take point and step into the mouth of the cave, which must be 30 feet tall. We flip our knots up on their mounts and turn on our surefire flashlights, since there wasn't enough ambient light in the cave for the NVGs to be effective. This cave is absolutely massive. We're in a full wedge formation, spreading out 60 meters total, and still have room on either side. We step over the arms, legs, and torsos of dead hajis as we move. I can hear the slush of pooled blood under my feet. Bones crunch as we step, heel to toe. We see tables and communication gear all within a couple 100 meters of the cave opening. The hajis were afraid to go deeper. Yet, our dumbasses were doing just that. We continue walking for at least an hour before the smell overcomes it. It smells like corpses and shit. He looks at us as we nod in unison. He has tears in his eyes and starts again. You'll never forget the first time you feel that fear. It comes over you like a tidal wave, moving from head to toe until your body stops working. I instantly know something is wrong. I try to tell the team to halt, but nothing comes out of my mouth. We instinctively pull in tighter and face outward, our flashlights darting back and forth against the pitch-black walls. I see the ridges of these ancient caves and giant stalagmites. Suddenly, what I think is a wall begins to move. My flashlight catches this enormous beast. It looks like a man, but it's at least 15 feet tall. Its head and hands looks disproportionate to its body. Absolutely massive. It slowly turns its head at me, peeking around a cavern wall, its eyes glowing unnaturally from my flashlight. Smiling, it speaks in ancient Hebrew, with the most menacing look on its face.
Israelite, I hate his chosen.
The evil is nothing you can see on a human, no matter how terrible they are. It bends down and flicks me. I swear to God, it flicks me like a human would flick a bug. The blow knocks me backward and against the wall, the creature laughing so loud that the cavern shakes. The team opens up on the beast. He pauses, as I can hear the regret in David's voice. We are totally unprepared. The entire team shoots center mass. I mean, that's what we are taught our entire lives. It does absolutely nothing. The creature grabs Captain Holmes and throws him against the wall, killing him instantly. It bites down on Jay's neck, snapping his head off in its mouth. Jay's headless body slumps to the floor. Blood pours down its lips, smiling while it chews. It looks at me and says,
Having fun yet, Jew? Where's your god now?
One by one, the team falls. I'm the last one standing, having expended all of my ammo. I fall to my knees and begin to pray. The ground shakes as it slowly walks toward me, chewing on one of my teammates' arms. The beast is taking its time. It's taunting me. The thing picks me up around the torso, breaking 3 of my ribs and bringing me to eye level. It then says,
I will let you live, because you are weak and useless. You, who are made in your God's image. You will remember me when you sleep, and you will seek death.
It then tosses me to the floor, knocking the wind out of me. The beast gathers what's left of my team and walks deeper into the cavern. I scream for it to kill me. It just laughs maniacally and disappears into the dark. I spend the next 6 hours walking back to the patrol base. I was finally picked up by the medevac chopper. You know the rest. CIA agents are on board and don't let my story see the light of day. They threatened me with prison time and death. All I wanted was to get onto another team to avenge my brothers. Now I'm here, 5 years later, with you assholes. And I did avenge my team. We avenged my team. For that, I thank you. I'm going to have a smoke now. Afghanistan, 2009. Task Force M. COP Exodus. This thing was massive. It was like 50 feet tall. Its wings spread, filling up the cavern. Its voice shook the ground. My Marines went crazy and started killing each other. The conference room I sat in had 37 chairs, each with a different nameplate. I didn't recognize the names. They sounded like ancient Hebrew. Welcome to Task Force M. We research and kill the enemies of mankind. Those things that hide in the shadows that campfire stories were created about, Lieutenant Colonel Williams said. From now on, you'll be referred to as Benaniah. Never use real names when referring to task force members. We don't know who to trust. The last man to hold your seat died in the most terrible manner. But he did so while saving his brothers. His memory and contributions to the safety of humanity will not be forgotten. The dozen operators seated pounded the table 3 times in unison. Lieutenant Colonel Williams told David to give me the tour of FOB Exodus as he went back to briefing the rest of the team. David hit my shoulder, smiling in excitement as he took me out of the conference room. There are 4 wings connected to the conference room within COP Exodus. Each represents an evil that our task force has encountered. Each is used to research and teach about those entities. The end state is to figure out how to kill them effectively and figure out what their plans are for humanity. Generally, 2 TFM members are responsible for each wing. Wing 1 is all about the big guys. That giant that you helped take down was one of them. We believe they're Nephilim or Rephaim. Keep in mind that everything we learn is theory. We base it on first-hand accounts, scripture, and other ancient texts and legends all seem to contain stories of the giants. It's hard to prove these things are what we believe, because they're not exactly easy to have a conversation with, he said with a chuckle. Ira, the Israeli commando, and I are in charge of this wing, mainly because we can both read and understand ancient Hebrew and translate early scripture and texts. I was the one that saved you from that abomination. It was not a dream. Your soul was in Sheol for a brief time, before I lifted you from that purgatory. Sorry for the extended delay in posting part 5. I've been to hell and back. I was pulled out of military class 5 months ago by the same man that visited me before. He clearly has some clout, because no instructors in school even questioned his motives. I can't explain how difficult it is to walk into a building full of US military captains and majors and just walk out of the front door with one of them. He must work within the government and must have some serious connections. I knew what was happening, but also knew that he was looking for information about Task Force M. I knew that I would be admitting guilt if I fought him. So, I went along. The experience was not a fun one. January to June 2019. I'm John Smith. I just have a few questions for you, the man said with a devilish grin as he led me out of the classroom. Okay, I'm an open book. What would you like to know, sir? I said, ensuring my voice didn't waver and that I didn't show any outward evidence of my heightened awareness of danger. My sixth sense was now trickling up my neck, hairs standing on end, and chills cascading through my body. This guy radiated evil. He looked at me with his sleazy smile and $5,000 suit, and said, "All will be understood in good time." I could see the evil behind his eyes. This man was a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I knew from the moment we made eye contact that I was either going to end up in a body bag, or that I would have to convince this scum that I was on his side. I waved at the security guards as we left the building. The nice thing about getting shot at for a living is that you learn how to keep your composure in dangerous situations. I wasn't about to show this man any fear or weakness. He walked me to a large black van, which was parked near the front entrance to the building. 4 guys jumped out and ushered me into the backseat. They were his security team, but they looked more like goons than soldiers. All 4 were very large men and had matching tattoos on the left side of their necks. It appeared to be a triangle or pyramid. If you're in a profession that practices violence for long enough, you learn how to size people up quickly. These guys were highly trained. Likely former special forces, and clearly not American based on their accents. The driver started the van and we began moving toward the main gate on post. My captors pretended to be friendly, making small talk and avoiding my questions. As soon as we were off post, they changed. The large bald-headed bastard next to me elbowed me in the face. The others put zip ties on my wrists and ankles and threw a black hood over my head. One of them then struck me with something in the neck, and I passed out instantly. I woke up in a pitch black 6x6 room. No toilet, no bed, no freedom. I couldn't even see my hand inches from my face. Well, fuck, I said aloud. I began to feel along the wall and floor for any possible escape. Nothing. The walls felt somewhat like glass, but the texture seemed to move and ripple with the motion of my hands. It was like moving your hand along the top of water, but the wall behind was much too firm for that. It didn't budge when I shouldered it, and I was unable to find a door anywhere along the wall. I decided to lay on the floor and think through my situation. I began to think of my wife and mom, but pushed them out of my mind immediately. CRC taught me to concentrate on the moment and not allow my beautiful memories to break me. Those memories can be utilized to stay alive, but you shouldn't dwell on them or they will likely do the opposite. The sooner you accept that you're dead, the better off you will be. That acceptance makes it easier to fight. I began to think through the situation in my mind, deciding how to present myself to my captors. I knew this was likely about Task Force M, and knew that my captors were not fans. Do I carry myself in my usual manner, confident, strong-willed, and dangerous? The advantage to this is, if they know anything about me, which they likely do, they'll be confident that I'm not hiding my true self. Or do I pretend to be a pushover and passive, making them feel superior and making them doubt my capability to serve on TFM? I decided to blend the two, displaying my true personality but dumbing down my knowledge and intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Williams once told me, a blunt object is much less dangerous than a well-informed warrior. So, I became the blunt object. You need to understand that I was being drugged for the rest of my time in this compound. I believe they were using 3 drugs. The first was a sort of truth serum, which didn't seem to affect me. The second was meant to break me by causing incredible pain. The third was some sort of hallucinogenic, which caused visual and auditory hallucinations. I believe I was able to sort through what was real and what wasn't, based on my ability to feel physical touch. But I have no way to support my claims, and no way to know if the drugs affected me more than I realize. Maybe you can help me sort through the past 5 months. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang and a whooshing sound. It didn't sound mechanical, more like magnets moving something, as if the walls being moved were not physically touched in the process. Bright red lights flashed on. I was standing in the middle of a giant room, half a mile long and 150 feet high. I had not left my prison cell, but I was somehow no longer standing in it. There was no evidence of where the walls and ceiling had gone. Cubes, like the one I was being held in, were littered throughout the room. They seemed to contain absolute darkness. The red lighting seemed to crawl around them, blotted out by the black within. It was clear that, if there were occupants in them, they could neither hear nor see me. The red lights flooded the entire room, making it appear to be soaked in blood. A foul stench was in the air, like blood, shit and vinegar mixed together. The feeling of absolute evil surrounded me. It was almost enough for me to immediately crack. I felt like I was somewhere that no human is meant to see. I slowly turned in a circle, scanning the room and realizing that I was surrounded by at least 2,000 guards. They were wearing all black, with gear resembling that of elite special forces units. They had ballistic helmets, plate carrier vests, and additional protection up and down their legs. All wore ballistic masks. Some had painted the masks to appear as skeletons. Some painted their masks to look like devils. All seemed happy to be here. I could sense that they were giddy to begin torturing me. John Smith stood in front of me. He still had the same $5,000 pinstripe suit on. He was around 5'9", with pale white skin and a slightly plump body. He had the scariest fucking grin and kept licking his lips like he was looking at a steak. He was flanked by 2 huge men. Each had to be at least 6'8". Both had long black cloaks on. They reminded me of Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. I started to think that I really must be tripping balls when I noticed the weapons in their hands. They looked like long swords, but the blade appeared to contain a black liquid that slushed back and forth, acting as if it had a life of its own. A plume of black smoke was emanating from the weapons, seemingly dancing toward their leader. Fear. They're putting on a show to break me, I thought to myself. I rattled off my name, rank, serial number, and birthday. That's what all soldiers are trained to say when interrogated. "Cut the shit, Mike," John said. "I'll make this easy on you if you tell us what you know. Where is Task Force M?" He was clearly enjoying this. He remained motionless, but his eyes had an air of delight to them. "I'll do you one better. Why is Task Force M?" I responded, smiling like I was clever. Apparently, he wasn't fond of my Drax references, because pain suddenly electrified my body, dropping me to the floor. I was hit with the most intense pain imaginable. It felt like my skin was melting and my blood would boil through my pores. My head felt like it was going to pop, and my internal organs felt as if they were being slowly ripped apart. I heard a hum, then a click, and the pain stopped. I rose from my knees, glancing down to ensure my body was still intact. I went back to attention and stared John in the eye, pretending that I wasn't impressed by the torture. "Remember, you're a big dumb ape," I thought to myself. "What do you want?" I said, playing dumb. "Where am I? People are waiting for me. Kidnapping a US Army major is probably not a great idea." "You're in hell," he interrupted. "My hell. I'm the king of this place, and I'm protected by my demons." His security team all yelled in unison as I was dropped by the intense fiery pain again. "You're going to tell us what you know, or you'll never get out of here." "I'm not afraid of death, but I also don't have anything to hide," I said, bracing for the next blast of pain. "I won't do or say anything that puts my rangers at harm, though," I yelled. I was concentrating on my life as a ranger, not my life within TFM. Always stick to a half-truth if you're ever in captivity. It makes it much easier to lay your lies. "I don't care about your rangers, and you will tell me everything you know about TFM," he said calmly. "I've always had this gift, or curse, depending how you look at it. Only 3 people know about it: my wife, mom, and aunt. Since I was a teenager, I've been able to look into people's eyes and know what type of person they are. Generally, the dominating force in their life shows through. I'm not telepathic or empathic. I can just see who that person is. I see what good or evil is the dominating force in their life. I've seen a bit of everything in the eyes of others: violence, apathy, greed, pedophilia, bigots, occultists. The ability is so intense and disheartening that I often avoid looking people in their eyes. It's exhausting seeing so much evil and so little good." John's eyes were like nothing I'd ever seen. They didn't look human. The physical eyes were those of a normal human. But what lay behind the eyes was demonic. I was looking at the ultimate predator, one that did not see people as anything more than ants, a creature that has no capacity to do good. I was falling to my knees in despair on the inside. The dread, fear, and evil he emanated was much worse than that of the giants. This being could break humans by simply standing in their presence. I decided that, if I was going to die, I might as well put up a fight. I rushed the guard nearest to me, narrowly avoiding the asp as he swung at my head. I grabbed his wrist and torqued it to the left, slamming him to the ground. I got in a few punches to his throat, which was the only place without body armor, prior to being dropped with the boiling sensation again. I realized that the guard had a patch on his right arm. The red lighting made it difficult to see clearly, but it appeared to be the all-seeing eye. The pyramid was surrounded by the letters O-N-W. "Bring back his cage," John said. "Let him marinate for a few days." To my astonishment, my cage seemed to come directly out of the ground. Nothing appeared to be moving the walls or ceiling. They simply floated into position and formed around me. The walls looked clear, except for the liquid pulsating inside. The liquid looked like black ink, bouncing rhythmically like a heartbeat. The walls and ceiling slammed shut around me, trapping me in eternal darkness again. I tried to yell and pound the walls, but it sounded like I was underwater. No one was going to hear me, and the walls felt harder than steel. Then, they started. The fucking noises. I think the noises rotated every 12 hours, but I'm not sure since there was no way to gauge time. At first, they played a high-pitched shrieking sound, like nails on a chalkboard. This seemed to go on endlessly. It was so intense that my eardrums felt as if they would explode. Next was the sound of babies, crying in agony. It sounded as if they were being tortured, mixed in with cries of neglect. The final sound that was rotated in was that of puppies being tortured. I'm not going to lie. That one fucked me up. I lay on the ground and tried to put my fingers in my ears, but the sounds were too deafening. So I tried to create a pattern of the noises in my mind. Instead of hearing puppies crying, I would try to come up with rhythms and think of the syllables in the sounds. That seemed to give me a microscopic bit of peace. Then, the crazy shit started to happen. The music suddenly cut out, and my prison cell became illuminated. The light grew so powerful that I had to cover my eyes with my forearm. A massive figure was suddenly standing before me. It was as if the ceiling to my cell was suddenly pushed higher to accommodate this giant humanoid figure. I stood up, my head barely eclipsing this thing's torso. He must have been 10 to 12 feet tall, wearing a white robe with a silver breastplate and silver armor along his shins and arms. His armor was adorned with gold symbols that seemed to pulsate with each breath. He had a massive sword that was sheathed by his side. He looked Persian, with curly black hair, a large, well-groomed beard, and olive skin. He was ripped, but wasn't as bulky as the giants I had fought. It looked like he was built for speed and power. Essentially, he looked like the ideal soldier. Light seemed to radiate from his body, which was essentially bright above his head. White wings were furled behind his back. He shook them gently, as a bird does after flight. Still in fight mode, I looked into his bright blue eyes as I gained the courage to say, "It isn't going to be pretty, but I'll make you work for my death." The being chuckled a bit, and his booming voice said, "You'll have no fight from me, Ranger. In fact, we have fought side by side in many battles." I looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Do you not remember me?" he said. "I was the one that saved you from that abomination. It was not a dream. Your soul was in Sheol for a brief time, before I lifted you from that purgatory. The dream I had, after killing my first giant, rushed back to me." I tried to crack a smile and said, "Thanks for that. That giant seemed a bit pissed at me." He boomed the loudest, most affectionate laugh that I've ever heard, and said, "My name is Yura, and I've been with you since before you were born. I protected you while you grew and fought by your side, even when you couldn't see me. Your fight is not over, in this world or the next, as long as you hold firm to your faith." I began to ask what he meant by this world or the next, but he stopped me. He took a knee, resting his hand on my shoulder. The weight of his hand caused me to lean to that side. He looked me in the eye with an expression of mourning. "You will one day, as a brother," lead me in battle. But I can't take you out of here. The I Am desires that you experience your time here, for it will provide you the strength you need in future fights. He is always with you, as am I. Do not bend to the captor's will. Many souls depend on you. I glanced to Yura's arm, where I noticed a long gash. The meat was pulled apart, and blood was slowly trickling down his waist. When I looked back at him, he was gone. The room quickly turned pitch black. Alarms suddenly sounded as the walls to my cell folded into the ground, and I was spilled back into the large room, illuminated by the red lights once again. To my horror, John, my captor, rushed into the room. He did not seem to be moving like a human though. It was as if he was floating at the speed of sound, a plume of black smoke that traveled half a mile in an instant. His body suddenly formed in front of me. "Where is he?" he screamed. "Where is who?" I responded. "That enemy of the Order, Yura," he said, nearly choking when he pronounced the name. I suddenly noticed that John had a large gash on his chest, and that his face was bloodied and bruised. The bodies of his guards littered the room. It was a massacre. There must have been 24 bodies scattered on the floor and in the rafters. Some were missing heads, some appeared to be cut in half, others were missing multiple limbs. All were clearly dead. There were pools of blood everywhere. The sight was almost mesmerizing, since the color of blood matched perfectly with the flood of the red lights. "Whoa, someone really fucked you clowns up, didn't they?" I said, while I laughed at him. "Big mistake." He picked me up above his head, clenching my throat with one hand. He was shaking violently and seemed to be trying to snap my neck. I could feel my life slipping away. But he couldn't kill me. It was as if some invisible force was stopping him from closing his hand completely. He threw me down hard, and the cell suddenly formed back around me. Over the next few months, I gathered as much intel as I could while being tortured. The guards kept referring to something called the Order. I heard accents from every part of the world. I was starved and drugged repeatedly. They would sit me in a chair every couple of hours, inject me with the drug, and then proceeded to torture me. The drug somehow enabled them to hijack my mind and make me feel death over and over again. I couldn't feel their actions with my physical body, but my nerves responded to what my brain was registering, so the pain felt real, just different than physical touch. In the simulator, they would chop me up piece by piece, only for my body to reform again. They'd make me feel as if I was dropped in the ocean, taunted, and then eaten by great white sharks. They'd light me on fire, and I would feel my body melt and would hallucinate my skin and muscle falling from the bone. They'd take me to the top of a building, thousands of feet tall, and push me off the side. It'd take minutes for me to hit the ground. I secretly preferred this one. Those minutes were the most peace I got in this place. They made me relive my worst nightmare. In 2009, I was escorting a general through Kabul one summer when a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device narrowly missed my vehicle. The Al-Qaeda fighter managed to miss my convoy and blow up 80 Afghan civilians. I had to pull security while Afghans shovel limbs, torsos, and hamburger meat off of the road. I can't think of a worse thing to see, and those bastards made me relive it every day. The worst by far was when they would simulate the giants that I killed. They would taunt me and break my body slowly. I'd then have to watch them eat my body before I would awaken, and it would start over again. I don't know why they let me go. They seemed to be on a timeline, and I heard the goons saying that there's no way I knew everything. He didn't break. No one could have withstood that. John ordered his men to strap me in a chair and told them to wipe my memory and implant a chip. If he knows anything, he'll lead us to them. Only one guard remained. He started to turn the machine on, then leaned forward inches from my face. He pulled his balaclava up slightly, revealing what looked like an ash cross underneath, the kind Catholics put on for Lent. Whispering, he said. I'm sorry, but you must remember everything. I trust you entirely. He then injected me with something, and then turned on the machine. I woke in front of my home, in uniform and 40 pounds lighter. Apparently, they told my wife and instructors that I'd been pulled for a special mission. My wife immediately knew something was wrong though. She embraced me tightly for what felt like hours and told me, "If you're ever ready to talk, I'll listen." I gave her an understanding look, which told her to never ask about what happened. That night, I woke to Lieutenant Colonel Williams standing at the foot of my bed. He said, "Well done, Ranger. I'm so proud of you. I've got a mission for you to relay to TFM and the warriors of the world. We're going to be fighting side by side soon." He put his hand on my forehead, and I could suddenly see armies converging towards somewhere in the Middle East. It looked like the entire world was getting ready to fight over one small piece of land. Lieutenant Colonel Williams pointed up, and that's when I saw armies fighting above. On one side, there were hundreds of thousands of angels with swords and shields or bows and arrows. All were glowing as brightly as Yura. It appeared as if humans were mixed within their ranks. Most appeared to be in the lead of elements of angels. They too were armed with golden swords or bows. They all marched in step, yelling something in a language I did not understand. The rhythm and language was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I heard a horn on the other side of the battlefield and saw a force of millions marching toward the angelic warriors. The enemy seemed to be led by angels. These angels looked much different though. They had black wings and their armor was all black, green swords unsheathed. They were leading giants, grotesque beasts, and humans. They sounded a horn that elicited a great fear in me. They shouted obscenities that no human could imagine. The ground began to shake under my feet as the sky turned to darkness and the moon turned red. Lieutenant Colonel Williams touched my head again, and I was back in my bed. "Get them all ready. The fight is coming soon. All must choose a side. The true warriors of God will not end their fight in your world," he said. He smiled and suddenly disappeared. That was Lieutenant Colonel Williams. But he's dead, isn't he? My wife, lying beside me in bed, said. "Yes, I held him during his final breaths and watched his body burn," I replied. "I guess it's time that I tell you what I've truly been doing for the past 12 years. We're going to have to warn the world and pray that the true warriors come forward. It appears that his world and ours will both be at war soon." One of the most universal experiences amongst us humans are the moments spent gazing into the cosmic time map of the stars. Many of us have wondered if other life exists. How did it all begin? What does this all mean? These questions drove me to the stars from a very young age, and by grade school, I was already reading college-level literature in everything relating to astronomy and astrophysics. Still, my hunger for knowledge was insatiable. For every question answered, 10 more would sprout in its place. Why are we here? How did life come to be in such hellish conditions? What about space itself? Could life exist out there in the freezing black void? The answer isn't what you'd expect. You have no reason to believe a word I say. And even so, this message may not reach you at all. But I won't let our sacrifices go unheard. I have to leave a record in case I don't make it back to tell you this myself. I have to try. For everyone back home on Earth. For Dr. Bigham. For Weaver. Our mission was top secret, our purpose and destination unknown, until just before launch. We were told we were selected to test the first spacecraft constructed for faster-than-light travel. The mythical Alcubierre Drive, my mentor and colleague, Dr. Avram Bigham, through some miracle of science and technology, had created it. Ever the stubborn mule, Dr. Bigham only reluctantly invited the world's most elite scientists and engineers to finalize the ship's construction, and personally selected the crew from a pool of participants around the globe. Dr. Bigham had been my hero when I was attending university. He had such a fire in his soul for astronomy and would reject all absolutes when it came to physics. Nothing is impossible, was his mantra. He would talk endlessly about how faster-than-light travel could be possible, how humanity could harvest the power of black holes and become the titans of the universe. It was our destiny. His passion was infectious, and so I made it my own life's goal to see humanity finally gain access to the stars. Our endless nights in research finally paid off with the creation of the space research vehicle, Arkham. I was in complete shock, and didn't think any of it was real. Not when we arrived on Luna to begin basic training, not when we arrived on Titan to begin final preparations. Not until the moment when I was floating naked in the suspended animation tank, preparing for our 4-year trip to the edge of the solar system. There, our journey would truly begin. Hypersleep, in actuality, was nothing like any movie or program I had ever seen. There was nothing to keep me warm for the 20 minutes it would take to enter hypersleep. My eyes were bound shut with surgical tape, so my only sensation was the piercing cold of the sub-zero degree water. The pain was excruciating, but the only reminder that I was even still alive. I was sure I would die before stasis was triggered, but in that same second, it finally happened, and I felt the inky black of space completely take over. For once, I was happy to be asleep. I don't remember a single dream I've ever had, having been an insomniac for much of my life. But I remember the dream from hypersleep. I was lost at sea. The ocean was deep black and was almost bottomless. There was a sky, but its deep midnight purple hue was almost indistinguishable from the Black Sea. The darkness masked the shadow of the many creatures I could sense just inches below my feet. Once or twice, I felt what seemed like rows of teeth running ever so softly down my legs. It could have been for just a moment, or maybe an eternity. But without warning or pain, I was pulled downward and plunged straight into the abyss. I didn't dare open my eyes. All I could do was pray for a quick death. The first sense I regained was the wave of warmth that washed over my exposed, waterlogged body. I couldn't see yet, but I could feel my fingers were soaked and rubbery from such a long submersion. Quickly afterward, I became aware of a flurry of voices. Some were muffled and distant. Another was close and clearer. It was Weaver, our medical technician, just awakening from hypersleep himself. I remember that he'd been the first doctor to practice on Mars, and as my eyes opened slowly, and his nearly perfect physique, at even 50 plus years of age, was alluring and helped me bring my other senses into focus. Without warning, my ears were filled with sharp shooting pain. The blaring alarm overhead quickly forced the remaining fogginess to retreat. I knew this alarm. I had heard it before. It was the life support fail system Dr. Bigham and I had designed together. A growing dread replaced the momentary excitement I had only felt seconds ago. I turned over quickly, splashing water everywhere, to see who it was. It was Dr. Bigham. It had happened only once before in recorded spaceflight. But he went into cardiac arrest the exact moment he entered stasis. His heart was now failing without the machines to keep him alive. Weaver was the first to reach him and frantically began performing CPR. It was all in vain, as the all too familiar sound of a flatlining heart monitor were the only things we could hear outside Weaver's desperate pleas. Roberts, the ship's captain, rushed to stop Weaver's endless compressions, knowing it was too late. The next few hours were a haze as the rest of the crew awakened and processed how to go forward. There was a plan, as there always was. There was no joy to be had logging into the mainframe to assume the title of Chief Science Officer. I had hoped to one day lead my own expedition into the void. I never wanted it to be like this. As the other crew were grieving and dealing with post-stasis recovery, I turned the ship on sector by sector and began plotting our course. That's when I noticed it. It was peculiar at first. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I tried to align the ship with Alpha Centauri, but the ship's computers kept failing to plot a course. I knew I was doing everything correctly. My very soul had been embedded into this ship. I knew every circuit and every switch on the bridge. Troubled, I looked out into the expanse of interstellar space that lay right in front of me. My eyes searched for familiar constellations and areas I knew I would recognize. Once I found one, I tried tracing it back to the spot where I knew Alpha Centauri was. Only, I didn't find it. I searched every point in the sky. But no matter how long I searched, I could not find Alpha Centauri anywhere. This was impossible. Surely some kind of post-traumatic stress from the voyage in stasis, and now Dr. Bigham's unfortunate passing. As far as our scans could detect, our destination had gone dark. An unease unlike anything I'd ever experienced crept over me. The mysterious nature of our mission and lack of any details before launch was starting to make sense. Dr. Bigham must have known. How many others knew? What else had the doctor been hiding? I said nothing, as the rest of the crew silently entered the presentation room. Roberts was doing her best to maintain appearances, but rumors of romance with the doctor had been floating around for months before our launch. Now, her stark and blank expression was more worrying than normal. "Captain, I need to address the crew." I was shaky and unsure as I spoke. Roberts was a commanding figure within the crew, a no-nonsense stronghold of a woman who could drink me under the table before beating me over the head with it. "It can wait until after the briefing." Her words were stern and cut through the bone. "I'm sorry, with all due respect, but it can't wait. There's something I've just discovered, and that was an order, Blair. Now, please start the presentation and have a seat. You may speak after the briefing." Her words were a swift rebuke of my desperate pleas. For me, that confirmed she already knew what Dr. Bigham was about to posthumously tell us. Quietly, I obeyed her instructions and started the recorded memos the late doctor had left. His haggard face flashed up on the screen, the deep ridges in his skin prominent and his hazel eyes looking straight into the camera from behind his absurdly oversized glasses. There was a deadly seriousness to his expression, a rarity for him. Whatever the reason for Alpha Centauri's sudden disappearance, it was taking quite the effect on him. The knot of anxiety and dread that had formed in my stomach was now twisting into a monumental sense of grave danger for all of us.
Fellow crew of the Arkham, it will have been my greatest failure should these recordings ever reach you. For all it means that my life's work and my journey alongside you to Alpha Centauri have failed. Now, I must place upon you the most terrible of burdens.
His words dripped with both heartache and a slowly rising fear. I could hear nothing but the labored breaths of my crew as we listened.
By now, you have cleared the Oort cloud and are in the final preparations to perform the very first hyperspace jump using the immaculately designed jump drive of my own creation. You know this to be your primary and only objective, to oversee the first successful faster-than-light voyage to our closest stellar neighbor, the star system designated Alpha Centauri, then return home. This is only half true.
The bomb, the one we were all waiting for. Of course, there had been more to this mission than just simply testing the drive. Why else had a heavily decorated military commander with extensive combat experience be made the captain of a scientific mission? I looked over at Captain Roberts and was surprised to meet her gaze in return. Her attention could not be further away from Dr. Bigham's posthumous presentation. Instead, she appeared to be studying me, looking for my reaction. Maybe she thought I knew as well that Dr. Bigham had already told me before the mission. My confused and puzzled face must have surprised her as she turned away the same second our eyes had met.
What you're about to hear is considered top secret by every recognized sovereign body on Earth. 4 years before the start of our voyage, an amateur astronomer reported a strange finding to NASA. It seemed that our nearest stellar neighbor, Alpha Centauri, had suddenly, and without warning, vanished from sight.
There was a murmur of conversation amongst the crew now. An entire star system vanished? Impossible. Surely a miscalculation. Hearing these words coming from Dr. Bigham's mouth, I still didn't believe it. There was no precedent for this. A star cannot simply vanish, especially not the star closest to us. Dr. Bigham paused for a few moments, allowing us to absorb the full weight of what his words meant. I noticed his hands trembling, a condition he had kept hidden from most. They hadn't stopped shaking the entire video.
Repeated attempts to locate the binary star system have all failed. Proxima Centauri, the third member of the system, is still detectable, but we have been receiving strange oddities and fluctuations in output. You may remember some years back when astronomers reported similar findings from Tabby's star. Your primary destination is now Proxima Centauri, specifically the region of the planet located within the red dwarf's habitable zone. You will make your initial observations there. A crew of 2 will then board the ship's emergency shuttle, which has also been outfitted with a jump drive, and chart a route to the site of Alpha Centauri. You will record any data there is to be obtained, then report back to the Arkham. If all succeeds, you will then chart a course back to your present location to begin the journey back to Titan. The severity of your situation must not be underestimated. There is no natural or physical phenomenon that we have ever recorded that is remotely capable of producing this anomaly. Besides, there is something even more disturbing. I've traced star maps from all across history, and there is a direct line of stars that have all seemingly disappeared throughout the galaxy that led directly to Alpha Centauri. This anomaly whatever it is, does appear to be spreading. I'm sure I don't have to tell you which system is closest to Proxima Centauri. Also, there is the nature of the jump drive themselves. All you need to know is that they are powered by an extremely volatile engine, and miscalculations and impact debris are high risk factors. So you must proceed with the utmost caution. You are all truly in no man's land now.
The doctor took a long pause, perhaps growing weary from the weight of this information. He ran his hands through his thinning curly gray hair, then took one final look at the camera.
One can only hope these files never reach you, and that we will together solve this mystery. But if not, if these truly are my last words to you, then Godspeed.
With that, the screen went blank, and a heavily uncomfortable silence cloaked the entire room. The one sound that registered with me were the occasional beeps from the ship. Roberts was the first to speak up. "Blair, you may now address the crew," she said with just a hint of sarcasm. "No need now. Dr. Bigham pretty much covered it," I said blankly, still locked into a gaze with the blank screen. My mind was racing over the possibilities, over what could have happened to Alpha Centauri and the other stars Dr. Bigham had mentioned. What was more troubling to me was the mention of Tabby's star, which has indeed recorded bizarre fluctuations in light output. Some have speculated that an advanced alien race could be constructing a Dyson swarm around the star, though no solid theories have ever been conclusively proven or disproven. This was something completely different though. Tabby's star was still detectable, whereas two whole stars from a system were now entirely gone. Proxima Centauri, a low-mass red dwarf, appeared to be next, but as it was not visible to the naked eye, we would have no idea of what we would see until we got there. Roberts took notice of the shocked expression of the entire crew, and, for the first time, spoke with just the slightest hint of concern in her voice. Dr. Bigham left detailed instructions for everyone to follow in the event of his death. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? It didn't take long for the first protest to start. Torrance, the ship's pilot and Roberts, second in command, was the first. "Are you kidding me? This is insane. There is no way we can go through with this mission now that we just lost our only scientist." His fear and anger were clear as he almost spat through his teeth. Torrance and I had once both been peers of Dr. Bigham before I was chosen to be his assistant. Our already fragile and competitive relationship quickly soured after that, and Torrance threw himself headfirst into piloting. "I agree, we have no clue what to expect when we get there, and now we've lost Dr. Bigham. I think we should test the jump drive to get back to Seoul. It would be a far better course of action now, in light of what's happened." I was surprised to hear Weaver joining in with Torrance. Weaver had a reputation for being rash and making risky choices that ended up saving countless lives. But now, he too was cloaked in the same fear everyone else was. "We cannot risk damaging the ship by flying through the Oort cloud. That's precisely why we had to wait until we had cleared it to begin the mission. As you have already been told, there are specific instructions." Torrance cut Roberts off, which was something no one had ever dared to do. The rest of the crew, shocked at his bravado, just looked on as their dispute continued to escalate. "I don't care. This is well beyond normal circumstances. Not only is the man who built this ship dead, but this whole mission was also all a lie. I would have never signed up for this if I had known the truth. And I'm sure most of you wouldn't have either." Torrance looked to be out of breath as he finished. He was scared. I could tell. Whatever concern and humanity Roberts had displayed earlier was swiftly replaced with her usual icy demeanor. "But you did sign up for this mission. You signed an ironclad contract. Now, of course, I cannot force you to participate. Our superiors are trillions of miles away. If you refuse, however, we will forcibly place you back into stasis until the completion of this mission, and I'll return to Titan, where you will be placed under arrest and stripped of your title, status, and all privileges. I have to admit, there was something provocative and sensual the way Roberts took control of any situation. I could see Torrance beginning to shrink in the presence of such a commanding woman. No doubt the both of them wanted to curb stomp the other. Still, Torrance had never been able to read the room. And so he continued on his tirade. "I'd like to see you try. Seriously, I'll fight every single one of you. No one's forcing me to do anything." Torrance was really trying to put on a brave front, but it just shattered completely in the face of someone who was clearly bigger, more powerful, and more intimidating than him. If someone didn't interject soon, this was not going to end well. As Roberts began making a motion towards Torrance, thinking on my feet, I jumped up to place myself between the two. "Stop, both of you. This isn't helping." My voice was shaky, and I didn't feel near the confidence I was trying to project. Roberts, taken aback, could only stare at me with her mouth slightly agape. Torrance, however, looked poised to attack at any moment. My feet stood firm though, and I continued. "Torrance, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. You heard what Dr. Begum said. This isn't about us. It's about everyone else back on Earth. Screw you, Blair. What else do you know? You had your hand so far up Dr. Begum's ass. He must have told you everything." Torrance was becoming even more aggressive. I knew it was only a matter of time before Roberts forced her way back between us. "I didn't know. I swear. I only found out just before you did. I wouldn't have agreed to come either had I known the truth." I lied, hoping Torrance would take the bait. Nothing short of a gamma ray burst would have stopped me from joining this mission. "We all signed the same contract, Torrance, and there are 10 billion people that are counting on us. Not to mention everything that will be within our grasp once this ship is fully activated. The whole Milky Way galaxy, Andromeda, the local group, maybe even the entire observable universe. I know you, Torrance, and I know there's no way you wouldn't want to be a part of that. We need you." I stopped, allowing Torrance to absorb what I had just said. His shoulders began to relax, and I could sense his breathing returning to normal. Roberts looked on suspiciously. "Well, now that we've all regained composure, we will initiate the first jump to Proxima Centauri in T-1 hour. You may begin your preparations. Dismissed." Roberts didn't stay any longer and disappeared into her personal quarters. Not able to stand the thought of everyone staring at me, I left without a word and headed to the bridge. As I mindlessly brought all the systems online, the only thing I could think about was Alpha Centauri. Nothing but titanic darkness lay in the spot where our closest neighbor once was. What could have possibly caused an entire binary star system to disappear? The only real option in my head was some sort of black hole encounter. Maybe a rogue black hole that remained undetected disrupted the system, sending Alpha Centauri A and B into interstellar space. Even that remote possibility stretched my suspicion of disbelief well beyond its limits. The bridge doors opened, but I didn't register it at first, so the hand on my shoulder was quite a jolt. I jumped back to see Sydney, the most senior astronaut outside Roberts. She hasn't said a word during the presentation and resulting aftermath, but I could tell from her pale expression that she harbored fear of her own. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you," she sputtered sincerely. Sydney was the exact opposite of Roberts in almost every conceivable way, and in many respects reminded me a great deal of Dr. Begum. She had joined the NASA space program right out of college and was the first woman to set foot on the Titan at just 27 years old. The subsequent decade spent in space had taken a toll on her physical appearance, but her natural curiosity of the unknown still kept her from settling down. "It's okay," I assured her, turning my head back towards the expanse of space. I could sense Sydney was equally entranced by the view before us. Despite our now unprecedented and worrying circumstances, it was still a marvel of technical achievement to be able to see what we're seeing. The countless specks of glimmering light shining from hundreds and thousands of light years away were a living time capsule of an era long past. "Is everything ready?" Sydney asked half-heartedly. I could sense her unease. It was cold and familiar. "Yeah, just waiting for the rest of the crew to join us before we begin charging up the engine." It felt hollow just saying those words, as I had no idea what was even powering this ship. Dr. Bigham had cherished my devotion to him and his dream, but for some reason hadn't thought it prudent to include me in every aspect of its construction. This had infuriated me before, but now it only fueled my growing discomfort at having to fill in his shoes. This was truly a case of the blind leading the blind. "What do you think happened to it?" Her voice trembled. "Alpha Centauri? I have no idea. I have my theories, each one more implausible than the next." I finally turned to face her, but she kept her gaze forward. Sydney's almost ruby hair fell into curls all the way down to her neck, framing her narrow face. Her eyes looked glazed over, like she was seeing beyond space, beyond the cosmic horizon. "I don't think I want to know. Whatever it is, it can't be good." Sydney couldn't have known just how right she was. The rest of the crew began filling in one by one, with Roberts being the last to join us. She was still trying to hide her pain behind a wall of emotional indifference, but smeared eyeliner betrayed her true heart of hearts. I felt for her and admired her supreme courage. Torrance, however, made his contempt well known, rudely brushing past me as he made his way to his co-pilot chair. Roberts made her way to the front of the bridge before stopping to gaze into the abyss. I wondered what monsters, if any, gazed back onto her. "Blair, are we ready to begin?" she asked blankly, not even looking back at us as she strapped herself in her chair. "All systems are online and ready," I replied. "Torrance, have we aligned the ship with Proxima Centauri?" Torrance let out a reluctant "yes," with as much venom as he could muster. "Good. Begin the charging sequence, Blair." My fingers hovered over the buttons needed to trigger the charging sequence. This was the moment we had all been waiting for. We were about to engage in the first faster-than-light voyage to another star system. This was bigger than the moon landing, bigger than anything humanity had ever attempted before. But more than that, our entire perspective of the universe was about to change in a single moment. It was a terrifying prospect, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to know what awaited us at Proxima Centauri. "Blair, is there a problem?" Roberts asked curtly. No problem, Captain." "Then please begin the charging sequence." That had been the first time I had ever heard her utter the word please. Even under the circumstances, I was very much enjoying this less hardened version of Roberts. Without saying a word, I began the charging sequence. My anxiety was through the roof, and I had trouble staying focused, entering in the wrong sequence of codes more than once. It took close to 2 minutes before the telltale sounds of the particle accelerator connecting from the bridge to the engine room began blaring in our ears. The entire bridge began to vibrate, slowly at first, but increased in intensity as the drive powered on. I looked around me, studying the crew. Some of them had locked their eyes onto me, but turned away the second mine had intercepted their own. Torrance's expression had changed from just barely contained anger to outright hostility. Sydney was still staring ahead into space along with Roberts. I only caught a glimpse of Weaver before he turned away, but his expression was one of both abject terror and hesitation. At long last, the charging sequence had completed, and the ship's computer informed us that the jump drive was now ready for initiation. I looked back to Roberts, who turned her head just slightly in my direction. "On my command," she said. I took the longest, deepest breath I had ever taken in my life, then braced my mind, body and soul for whatever was about to come next. Roberts couldn't have known it at the time, but her next words sealed her fate, as well as ours. "Initiate." There was no pause, no hesitation this time, just the flip of a single switch. All at once, the sounds coming from the particle accelerator increased by almost 100-fold. My teeth were threatening to shatter from the intense vibration that echoed through every part of my body. I could hear the surging discomfort coming from the crew. Sydney had begun hyperventilating and needed oxygen fast. But before I was able to disengage her emergency mask, the jump drive activated. What followed next was an experience that bordered somewhere between pure ecstasy and a living nightmare. From the back of the ship, an enormous force started pulling us backward. I was sure I was about to face right through my chair. Space itself distorted in front of us as our view of the universe contracted and then expanded. The pressure was gargantuan, like being on a roller coaster going 1,000 miles per hour. My skin had flattened against my body, the way it does when you run your hands underneath an air dryer. I couldn't even turn my head an inch to see the rest of the crew, and the roar of the ship masked any cries they made. Trillions of miles flew past in an instant, closing the gap between us and Proxima Centauri. This was it, our monumental achievement in engineering. Against all odds, it had worked. At first, the space in front of us remained dark and empty. After what felt like only seconds, a pale red dot appeared on the horizon. Proxima Centauri loomed ahead, growing bigger and brighter with each passing second. The ship's computer reminded me to begin deceleration, and with great difficulty, I moved my fingers over the switch and immediately felt the ship begin to slow down. Just moments later, the entire ship jolted and sparks began to fly from overhead. Something had impacted the ship. This was not good. A second later, another impact caused another shower of sparks to shower down all around us. Screams from some of the crew, mostly Sydney, reverberated all around me. This had not been foreseen, as there were no detectable asteroid fields along our projected path. Our calculations had been so precise. From over the chorus of voices and screams, I could hear Roberts attempting to give out orders to remain calm, but they fell upon deaf ears. "Warning, damage critical. Engage emergency deceleration." This wasn't good. Our shield generator was failing. "Blair, engage the emergency stop," Roberts ordered from underneath an auditorium of sparks. "We can't stop at these speeds. The G-forces will destroy the ship." Roberts protested, but I knew what would happen if I listened to her. We could do nothing but wait, pray we had cleared the debris field, and stay calm. The ship stopped jolting, and once the ship reached the minimum safe speed, I disengaged the jump drive. The ship lurched forward violently, nearly ripping us out of our seats. The structural integrity of the ship had held up, but only just. Multiple systems were offline, and all of our communication channels were down. I unbuckled myself quickly to begin surveying the damage, blocking out the cries and attempts at Roberts to maintain control. There were more important things to deal with right now. As far as I could see, our storage compartment housing our ground survey equipment was compromised, so there was no telling how much equipment we had just lost. The shuttle was fully operational from what I could tell, as was the jump drive itself, but the backup generators and reserve cooling system needed to be repaired before we could even think about booting up the drive again. It was when I heard Weaver pushing himself in between Roberts and Torrance that I knew I had to intervene. I shouted for everyone to shut up and listen. As best as I could, I told them what we had to do right now if we wanted to stand a chance at getting back home. The energy in the room changed instantly. Despite the near-death experience and growing feuds, the crew immediately sprang into action. Roberts took advantage of this to assert control, but I could tell from several faces that this wouldn't last long. Torrance and I went to assess the cargo hold, hoping that the breach was small. We were dismayed to find the compartment had been wrecked by the breach. Several small holes had created enough suction to pull most of the equipment to the walls. Sparks were flying everywhere, and from the looks of it, our planetary surveillance rover was in pieces all over the ceiling. We would need to patch the holes before we could enter. Weaver joined us as Roberts watched on from the cockpit. She had continued to bark orders at everyone, but she was losing her cool, as most of them had gone unheard or ignored. There was nothing she hated more than losing her authority. Torrance was back to his passive-aggressive routine, so that left only Weaver and me to try and maintain the peace. As we worked, my eyes kept drifting to Proxima Centauri, enraptured by its glowing red light and dominance of the pitch-black sky. We managed to patch all the holes and repressurize the compartment. Not that it did us much good. All of our data collection modules and survey equipment had been trashed, leaving us with no way to scan the planets in the Proxima Centauri system. Not that it would matter anyways. When we were back aboard the ship, Sydney dropped yet another bomb on the crew. The planet that had been our original destination was no longer detectable, just like Alpha Centauri A and B. By this point, I had lost my ability to be shocked. Torrance, in a fit of anger, swung at Weaver as he tried to come in between him and Roberts again. I dove in to try and block him and ended up getting the full brunt of his fist to my left temple. The last thing I remember is my body hitting the floor before the pitch black took over again. No dreams this time, thankfully. When I awoke, Weaver was standing over me, looking as striking as ever. He smiled at me, a smile I returned in kind. Had our circumstances been different, I'd be resisting a powerful urge to kiss him. Instead, the weight of our situation collapsed on top of me almost instantly. Weaver said that Torrance was in isolation, with Roberts just one click away from placing him back into stasis. As I got up, the wave of searing pain in my temples nearly put me back on the table. Weaver gave me some beautiful pink pill that instantly put my throbbing headache at ease. Roberts wants us all back on the bridge as soon as you're ready, Weaver replied. I silently agree and left with him at once. When we arrived back on the bridge, Torrance had been let out of isolation, but was still brooding in the corner by himself. I could feel the hate radiating off of him while Roberts looked almost disabled and not her usual self. As soon as she saw me, she walked right over and pulled me away from Weaver. Blair, I know Dr. Bigham personally selected you for this portion of the mission. However, after Torrance's outburst and the discovery of the missing planets, I'm overriding his directives and will be accompanying Torrance myself. I thought she was kidding at first, but her stern and cold expression said otherwise. With all due respects, Captain Roberts, Dr. Bigham stated. Roberts cut me off before I could even protest. I know what he said. I was there. I know how to collect and analyze data, Blair. What I don't know are the ins and outs of the ship. And if something happens to you before the ship is operational again, we might never get back to Earth. Also, there is the matter of Torrance. His behavior is unpredictable at this point, and if he gets in the way of the mission, I'm not sure you'll be able to do what is necessary to prevent him from interfering. She was right. Torrance may have hated me by that point, but I didn't think I was capable of what Roberts could effortlessly do in the same situation. So I silently nodded my head in agreement, knowing there was nothing I could do to change her mind. There was still plenty of work that needed to be done on the ship. That much was true. Sydney and I would also have ample opportunity to collect what data we could from the Proxima Centauri system and hopefully repair some of the damaged modules. Still, part of me yearned to see what had become of Alpha Centauri, if there was anything else left to see. Robert asked for a status update on repairs, which I told her were still ongoing, but that the shuttle was up and ready for launch. Torrance made a scene as usual when told it would be him and Roberts piloting the shuttle to the Alpha Centauri system, but was otherwise undisruptive. Roberts then told everyone that once she was off the ship, I was effectively in charge until she was back. I was to oversee the final repairs and collect what data we could. I walked the two of them to the loading dock silently, watched them suit up, then bade them one final goodbye. Roberts nodded her head in return, but I was surprised when Torrance spoke up. "Good luck, soldier." There was something so stark, so brutal, the way he said those famous last words. I could only straighten my back and smile in return. The airlock doors slid into place, cutting off contact with my fellow crew for the last time. When I returned to the bridge, Weaver and Sydney were already gone, leaving just the technician Stanton and I to see the shuttle off. It was beyond breathtaking, observing faster-than-light travel from a distance. 1 second, the shuttle was drifting off in the distance. All at once, the space around it warped like the usual gravity lensing we see from black holes, but only for a brief moment. Space returned to normal as quickly as it had distorted, and a brilliant flash of concentrated light blasted off across the expanse of black space. That was the moment everything began to click into place. "Come with me, Stanton," I said and began heading out the exit. I always had a large stride, so I was out the door before he could even respond. "Where are we going?" he asked as he followed behind. "We're going to see what makes this ship tick." Perhaps curiosity truly did kill the cat, because that was all Stanton needed. He followed me wordlessly as we navigated the labyrinthine network of passageways and chutes to the engine compartment. Dr. Bigham had made it known he wanted it to be as difficult as possible for anyone other than him to be able to access this area of the ship, and for all intended purposes, he succeeded. After what felt like an hour, we finally made it to a long, dark and narrow corridor leading to the engine room. The door required a series of complex puzzles, almost like a video game, along with the chief science officer's code that was now mine. I almost laughed out loud, realizing how silly and over the top this all was. But that was the doctor, heart, body and soul. At last, the familiar hissing of the hydraulics sounded that the door was opening. What lay before us was about the most mundane and boring room you could ever hope to find on a ship. Dr. Bigham, the troll, was definitely starting to come out. The whole room was white, save for a perfectly round black spherical area that filled the entire middle of the room and dipped significantly into the floor, at least a yard or more. A manual computer station, hidden behind a wall, began unfolding its way out as we walked into the room. Stanton and I stood in awe, or maybe befuddlement. I'm not sure which. The sphere was a series of segmented plates made of what looked like marble. I ran my fingers over it and could feel it was still warm to touch despite it having been hours since the ship had stopped. I was trying to piece together how any of this made sense when I looked to the floor and saw a series of words written all around the spherical dip. It was the same phrase repeated over and over again. Outer Event Horizon Limit. The pieces began fitting together almost perfectly. The particle accelerator, the event horizon room, the jump drive. It was such a feat of engineering, yet elegant in its simplicity. My mouth dropped, just slightly. "Freaking incredible," was all I could say. What is it?" Stanton asked. "It's a black hole. That's what powers the jump drive. It warps the space around the ship, then the particle accelerator propels the ship forward. It's freaking brilliant, actually." "Holy shit, should we even be in here?" Stanton was beginning to sound panicked, and I don't blame him. As impressive as it was scary just how close to an actual potential black hole we were standing. "Probably not, but I'm sure it's turned off." "How do you know?" "We wouldn't be standing here right now if it was. Our atoms would be smashed all over the room." This seemed to calm him. I wanted to explore more, but then the ship's intercom blared overhead.
"Blair, Stanton, we need you in the observation room."
It was Sydney's voice, sounding garbled and worried over the speaker. We left without a word, navigating our way back to the central hub much faster than before. When we arrived, Weaver and Sydney were off in separate corners of the room. Sydney, hovering over her computer screens, looked almost startled to see us come in. "What's the problem?" I asked, fearing more bad news. "Well, I'm not sure. It's hard to explain." Sydney seemed flustered and on the verge of a breakdown. We all were, from the looks of it. When we arrived, I began plotting out a star map to see what the constellations looked like from here. For the most part, there was little variation. "Was?" I responded. I wasn't liking where this was going. "Yeah, well, when I was playing back some of the first recordings, I noticed stars that seemed to disappear and reappear, almost at identical intervals. I can't explain it. The whole star vanishes and then reappears just as quickly. It's like something is moving in front of it. But if that were the case, not only would it have to be beyond gigantic, but it would have to be much, much closer to us." Sydney stumbled over her words as if she herself didn't believe what she was saying. Even after everything that had already happened, this was yet more fuel to add to our growing nightmare. I was about to interject when the overhead intercom sounded again, this time from the ship's automated computer. "Danger, collision with shuttle imminent. T-minus 10 minutes until impact." What? Are they back already? Sydney and the rest of us began rushing to the observation deck. We gazed from inside the nearly 2-foot thick glass for the shuttle. If they were adrift without the ability to maneuver, then we would have to go spacewalk to retrieve it from hitting the ship. But the other possibilities that sprang from this were far worse. What happened to Roberts and Torrance? Why were they back already? Why couldn't they control the ship? We scanned the black horizon for any sign of the shuttle. It was Stanton that spotted it first. "There it is," he said as he pointed upwards off to our left. Sure enough, just barely visible and about quarter of a mile out of the shuttle, drifting slowly towards us. The emergency lights could be seen flashing, but other than that, it looked completely abandoned. "What do you think happened?" Sydney inquired. "I don't know. Weaver, you come with me. Stanton and Sydney, you both make sure the docking area is prepped." We broke into our groups and made haste. Weaver and I suited up and entered the cold vacuum of space yet again in record time. As soon as we tethered the ship, we propelled ourselves towards the approaching shuttle. As we got closer, several things became clear all at once. The airlock doors were open, leaving the cockpit completely compromised. I scanned for any damage, but so far the shuttle looked to be in fine working condition. Weaver entered before me and began locking the doors so we could re-establish the atmosphere and boot the ship's computer back up. I ordered him to keep his suit on, just in case. I had no idea what to expect and wanted us to be as protected as possible. My instincts turned out to be correct. As I was gathering the shuttle's flight recorder to take back with us, Weaver had tended to search the shuttle for our missing comrades. Just as I was removing the shuttle's flight recorder from its wall panel, a commotion sprung up behind me. I spun around to see Weaver now being throttled by another figure in a spacesuit, who I assumed to be either Torrance given his prior behavior. From the looks of it, they had been hiding in a storage locker and jumped Weaver once he opened the door. I reached for the electrical prod from a utility belt, but Weaver was slammed right into me by the suited figure before I could, knocking me to the floor and nearly taking the wind out of me. Weaver was short of breath and could only give me a confused, desperate look before he was launched to the other side of the cabin, banging up against the airlock. Standing above me now was the suited figure, whose visor had been pulled all the way down, masking their identity. I motioned to get up, but was slammed down to the ground by the figure, stomping on my arm and almost fracturing it. In its right hand was the utility axe equipped with all our spacesuits. Just as the axe began to swing down on my head, its body began surging and jolting. From behind, I could see Weaver ramming his electrical prod into the figure over and over again, but nothing seemed to faze it. Seizing the moment, I unclipped my own axe and, with only seconds to spare, slammed the metal edge into the side of the figure's helmet, shattering the visor, and finally, the suited menace slumped to the floor, me alongside it. For a moment, it was all quiet.
Weaver, start the docking procedure.
I managed to wheeze out. Weaver went to the cockpit, and within moments, I could feel the ship beginning to automatically pilot towards the loading docks. My gaze, however, was still locked onto the now smashed visor of our attacker. The looming form of the faceless, reflective black suit was terrifying enough. But it was what I didn't see that truly horrified me. I was gazing into the dark space where the person wearing the suit's face should have been, but there was nothing there. I crawled over the figure, expecting it to leap back to life at any moment. It lay still as I brought my face inches to the visor, still staring into that blank void. There was nothing. No eyes, no skin, no face, nothing. I reached into the visor, fingers outstretched. The very tip of my pointer finger made contact with something invisible and fleshy. That was enough for me to recoil my hand back and shriek out loud.
What? What's wrong?
Weaver had sprung into action at the sound of my distress, hands locked onto his prod. I just shook my head and backed into a corner. The shuttle jolted as it docked with the Arkham, and I could hear the airlock pressurize and the voices of Sydney and Stanton sound off from just beyond the doors. But nothing could rip my eyes from the horror of what lay in front of me. "Blair, are you hurt? What's wrong?" Weaver had never sounded more concerned, and it was this concern that finally snapped me out of my daze. The airlock doors opened, and Sydney rushed in, followed by Stanton. "Is everyone okay? We heard fighting over the intercom." Sydney was surveying the scene and saw the crumpled figure in front of us. "Who's that?" "We're not sure yet. They attacked us both as we were getting the shuttle back to the docking platform," Weaver explained. "There's nothing there," I said under my breath. "What? What do you mean?" Weaver asked as he looked towards our suited attacker. But I could see the flash of recognition go across his face as he saw what I saw. "What? What happened?" Sydney began, but she too saw that nothing was inhabiting the suit. Stanton began moving towards it, but I urged him to stop. I simply grabbed the cord that had tethered us to the ship and began wrapping it around the suit. "What are you doing?" Sydney sounded almost accusatory. "I'm not taking any chances." Weaver joined me in tying up our attacker, and once we were sure it was secure, both of us dragged the suit to the medical bay. Strapped to a table, we tried to break off the suit, but something had happened that had infused multiple parts of the suit and shredded it in other places. Weaver had found some baking powder and used it to spread a layer over where the face of the wearer should be. Sure enough, the form of Robert's face became clear as Weaver coated it with the powder, though her features were warped and upon closer inspection, Her skin appeared to be moving and distorting. I was baffled. The behavior of the suited figure had led me to suspect it was Torrance, but clearly it was not. Now, an even darker question loomed. As he could read my mind, Stanton spoke first. If this is Roberts, then where's Torrance? Nobody had an answer. I remembered the flight recorder, grabbed it without a word, then turned to leave. Stay here and guard her, or whatever that is. I'm getting some goddamn answers, I spat out. I was beyond scared, beyond terrified, beyond confused. The events surrounding us were only getting stranger by the minute. Whatever happened on the shuttle at Alpha Centauri, I knew it held the answers we sought. Footsteps sounded behind me, and I looked to see Weaver running up alongside me. I'm coming with you. No, please, wait with the others. If that thing wakes up, Sydney and Stanton can handle it. Besides, I want to know what happened on that shuttle too. I smiled and silently admired Weaver for his natural curiosity and spirit despite these dire circumstances. We walked briskly back to the central hub, flight recorder in tow, and began the process of accessing the data. The Arkham's communication systems were still completely offline, and so we had to upload the data manually. While we waited, I began pulling up the video archives. Weaver and I watched as Roberts and Torrance took off in the shuttle as they approached the binary star system. That was when things began to shift. The video files became increasingly corrupted, and Roberts and Torrance faded in and out of sea of multicolor static. The audio, though corrupted as well, remained audible, at least for the most horrific parts. Roberts was heard over the recorder, shouting and screaming unintelligibly, while Torrance tried to get her under control. The cabin rocked back and forth, as if pushed from something on the outside.
What's happening? The ship stopped. All systems down. Roberts, what?
Roberts looked to be in a trance from the few clips that managed to get through the static. A split second later, she was gone. It was as if she just phased out of existence.
Roberts, where the hell? Roberts! Roberts!
The audio cut off for a moment, only to resume with the sounds of horrified yelling in the shuttle's computer systems.
Warning, airlock systems deactivated. Cabin depressurizing in 30 seconds. What are you? Stop! Roberts! What are you doing? Stop! No!
The last split-second image we saw before the video cut out for good was of a suited Roberts by the airlock doors and a frantic Torrance grabbing hold of his seat for dear life before the airlock doors opened, sucking Torrance out of the frame and into the void of space. I thankfully looked away before the worst of it, but judging from the look on Weaver's face, he'd gotten a full look at Torrance's rapid decompression as his screams of agony were sharply cut off. The video and audio stopped after that. The silence in the room was deafening. Once more, all I could detect was our shallow breaths as we absorbed the horror show that had unfolded before us. What the hell was all Weaver could muster. A message flashed on the computer screen, telling us that the data had been fully processed and was ready. Hesitantly, I moved the cursor to the files, and one by one, numerous screens and charts began loading onto my screen. From what I could gather, as the shuttle had approached the side of Alpha Centauri, long-range telescopes began picking up two small bodies of mass in the exact position of the two stars. Though the temperature readings were cooler than any stellar body detected, and the size of the objects were roughly the same as Earth, they both had a mass far greater than anything a planet could substance. It took me a bit longer than normal to come up with a hypothesis, but once it emerged, it nearly took my breath away. I sat back in my chair, shaking my head in disbelief at what I was looking at. Something that had never been discovered before. Something that shouldn't even exist yet. That's not possible, I whispered to myself. What? What's not possible? Weaver was scared, but his fear was nothing compared to mine. I was silent for a moment more, still in utter shock at this newfound discovery. Alpha Centauri. It's still there. But it's become a black dwarf. An icy chill ran all down my body and back up my spine as I said those last words. What's a black dwarf? I didn't expect him to know what it meant. How could he? It was an almost empty and unexplored area of the celestial sciences. It shouldn't exist. It couldn't exist. It was a complete impossibility. This was no lie, however. No trick. No deception. The very first black dwarf discovered by man was less than half a light year away. Black dwarfs are the stellar remnants of white dwarfs after they've cooled to almost absolute zero. It's the final stage of all stars that don't turn into black holes, I explained. So what's the problem? The problem is, these things shouldn't exist yet. The time it takes for a white dwarf to cool is estimated to far exceed the known age of the universe. We're talking quadrillions of years here. But that's impossible. Apparently not, I sarcastically remarked, though the humor was lost amongst the tension and fear that had taken hold since the moment I had awoken from hypersleep. It felt like some fever dream, an ungodly nightmare that I kept hoping and praying would end, that I would awake in my hypersleep chamber, that Dr. Bigham would still be alive, and we would be on our way to make history, ensuring our names are engraved within science books for all time. Reality had been a cruel mistress, and I had an awful feeling she wasn't done yet. What do we do? Weaver sounded more desperate than ever, though I had no answers to offer this time. I don't know if there's anything we can do. If whatever caused this change has made its way to Proxima... My words trailed off. The mysterious fluctuations in light output, the shifting constellations Sydney had reported. Somewhere, something primordial was awakening. Just as those insidious thoughts penetrated my mind, the now ominous voice of the ship's computer sounded off once more. Attention, all personnel report to medical bay. Several crew members have experienced catastrophic injury. Catastrophic injury? I cringed and shuddered at what that could entail. Weaver and I gave one wordless glance to each other before jolting upwards and running down the long corridors to the medical bay. When the doors opened automatically, my eyes were immediately assaulted with a sense of horror I'd only ever seen in movies. I could only register the image of blood coating nearly every surface before the churning in my stomach overpowered me, and I twisted downwards to void the contents of my stomach. Though I was sure I caught the glimpse of what looked like a severed arm hanging off a table. Weaver didn't handle it much better than I did, and we both nearly fell backward into the corridor, the stench of iron clinging to the air. What the actual fuck? I'd never heard Weaver curse before. He had remained so composed, more so than all of us. Yet, it was this breakdown and curse that truly broke me. At the moment, I was convinced none of us were getting back to Earth alive. Sydney, Stanton, Torrance, Roberts, whatever has inhabited her form, was now loose aboard the ship. There's no telling where it could be now. I darted my head, looking down the corridors, half expecting it to come around the corner at any moment. Airlock breached. Warning, depressurization in loading dock. The blaring alarm and booming voice from the computer barely registered at first. It took Weaver shaking me and grabbing me off of the floor to break me free. We gotta go! Come on, Blair! Weaver was reasserting control, and it was all I needed to free my mind. We both grabbed our helmets and began running towards the loading docks. We turned the corner when the airtight doors dropped down almost directly in front of us. Just a few steps further and it would have split us right down the middle. Ship atmosphere compromised, sealing all airtight doors. From behind the now sealed doors, we could hear the pull of space sucking everything it could into the vacuum. A loud bang came from the doors. Whatever was on the other side, It knew we were here, and it was coming for us. My heart skipped a beat, and I contemplated the entirety of my life and everything that had led to this moment. I was half tempted to throw open the doors and launch myself into space, letting the void carry me into eternity. Something else was stirring inside of me though. A feeling I had never known before. It felt animalistic and raw. No, I wasn't ready to give up just yet. The fight to survive overpowered my fear for the first time. One way or another, this was going to end right here and now. Thinking on my feet, I called to Weaver. "Put your helmet on. I've got an idea." Weaver didn't question it and fastened his helmet on just as quickly as I did. We both hitched ourselves to the wall, and once I was in place, I silently looked over at Weaver, now unsure if this was a good idea. I peered deep into his eyes, looking for any sign that I should stop. But he only nodded to me, and that was all I needed to feel that surge of adrenaline again. My heart now racing and the heat in my head swelling, I took the plunge and deactivated the airtight doors. The moment they opened, the cold vacuum of space roared back to life, pulling us with great force towards it. The suction only lasted a few seconds, and soon the weightlessness of zero gravity surrounded us both. Looking ahead, I could only see Roberts, or what she had now become, floating in the doorway. Large chunks of the suit had been ripped off, and now the form that inhabited her remains looked more menacing than ever. There was no warning, no sound, nothing. All at once, the form charged full speed ahead towards us. I braced myself for impact, but couldn't have predicted the force at which it slammed into me. The jumbled mass of ripped fabric and bent metal began lunging at me, doing whatever it could to land as much damage as possible. I reached for my utility axe, but this time it had expected this and ripped it right out of my hands. Its gloved fists started pummeling into my suit and visor. Just as I thought, it would shatter the visor as I had done before. Weaver charged in from my side and slammed my attacker into the wall. My head was spinning from the attack and I couldn't see straight at first. I watched as Weaver attempted to subdue the creature, but with no success. After trying to break his visor with its fist and failing, it tried a new tactic and began slamming its face over and over into Weaver's. I knew he only had seconds left. Summoning all the strength I could, I propped my feet against the wall and launched my body with as much force as I could muster towards the airlock. Arms outstretched, I grabbed hold of the suited menace and carried us away through the corridor and towards the open mouth of space. Just before we reached the gateway, the suit twisted around and pushed us into the airlock walls. It started banging its head into mine with such ferocity. One crack appeared, then two, then more. At that moment, I surrendered to my fate. I said a small prayer for Weaver and reached for my prod. This was it. I was on the edge of oblivion, and I wasn't taking any prisoners. With every last bit of energy I had left, I activated the prod and pushed it straight into the open visor and deep into the suit. The suit convulsed, and through the small bit of powder still left, I watched as a look of pure agony was permanently etched into her face. Just as quickly as it began, its arms went limp and the convulsions stopped. The now motionless form drifted slowly backward and through the gateway, out of the ship, and into space. I was becoming lightheaded from the escaping oxygen and quickly closed the airlock doors to re-establish the atmosphere. I tried to stand up, but my body was beginning to crash from the adrenaline spike. So I tumbled down onto the floor as the gravity turned back on. My breathing became shallow, and once again, I was ready to surrender. Though it lasted only half a minute at best, the fight felt like I had climbed Mount Everest in a single minute. My heart was throbbing and at a risk of exploding through my ribs. The motion of someone removing my helmet and the rush of fresh air now filling my lungs brought me clarity. I looked up to see Weaver's worried but smiling face just inches from mine, and thought at that moment that I'd never seen a more handsome man in my life. I smiled back and laughed. Weaver laughed in return, and for once, the tension and dread that had filled us both was momentarily gone. He pulled me back to my feet, and slowly we made our way back to the central hub. I locked the doors and sealed the windows, though I'm not sure why. They wouldn't do us much good against whatever force of nature lurked just beyond. We both slunk to the floor, exhausted and unsure of what to say or do next. Weaver was the first to break the silence with a single question. "So, what is your hypothesis, Doctor?" He was attempting to be funny and let out a forced chuckle that I returned in kind. But to be fair, it was a valid question. I had been so lost in confusion and panic that I never really thought about the possibilities. What had happened to Captain Roberts? What had corrupted her, and why? What thing transformed Alpha Centauri into a cosmic graveyard? I'm not sure. I think maybe some sort of life form, but big, massive, something that would need an enormous amount of energy to survive. I thought about Roberts and how some part of her remained on that operating table. The way her skin moved and folded, she had either become invisible or assimilated somehow by this entity. This was the most puzzling of all. What had consumed her? What exactly was this thing made of? Normal baryonic matter seemed unlikely. What were the alternatives? The way it had reacted to the electric prod had been telling. I thought of more exotic forms of matter, such as dark matter and antimatter. We've never observed them before, and don't know if they even exist. But if they did exist, and there was enough of it gathered in one place, then there's no telling what could happen. Life sprung from literal hellfire during the early days of Earth. What would stop life from arising from the cold and empty tomb of space? It doesn't matter what it is. Not anymore, I said dejectedly. It was the hard truth, but the truth nonetheless. We sat in silence once more. I'm not sure for how long. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. The ship's computer, which had comically been the bearer of bad news, had one last omen of bad fortune to give us, and immediately caught our attention. "Attention, abnormal gravitational anomaly detected." I jumped up and made my way to the window, standing as close as I could. I searched. It didn't take long to find it. From afar, space and light from the stars began to warp in odd, undefinable ways. It seemed like the very fabric of space and time was folding and unfolding, twisting the constellations into something unrecognizable. The Arkham was positioned roughly 2 light minutes away, giving us plenty of space to watch the scene unfold safely, relatively speaking, but close enough for us to get a full view of Proxima Centauri's final fate. There are some events that defy explanation. No words invented by mankind could ever sum up the fear, horror, and pure existential dread witnessing that behemoth devour the red dwarf. I'm sure that, no matter how long I live, every time I close my eyes, that haunting image will be there, waiting for me. As the mass got closer, I could see small strands of superheated plasma begin to break away from the red dwarf. I watched in a mix of awe and horror as this monster of the universe began to cannibalize the last member of the Centauri system. The entire scene would have looked spectacular had it not been so nightmarish. Weaver was standing next to me, and all I wanted at that moment was another human to hold, to connect to protect me. Almost on instinct, I reached for his hand and wrapped my fingers around his. He didn't resist. In fact, he gripped my hand in his own. God Almighty! I'd never been a religious person myself, but Weaver's words seemed more than appropriate. We have to do something, I said, though I knew it was futile. As small and insignificant as we were, what could we do to fight against this gigantic leviathan? There was no force of nature we could harness that would stand a chance at annihilating this thing. Nothing. Outside of a black hole. I had completely forgotten about the engine room. It was a lifetime away, even though it couldn't have been more than a few hours ago. I know what we have to do, I said plainly, my mind now racing to formulate a plan. I explained the engine room black hole generator and how it was what powered the warp drive. If we could pilot the ship into Proxima Centauri and breach the event horizon, that would result in an enormous explosion that should tear apart whatever it is. I was giddy as the plan began to unfold. We might actually have a chance at saving ourselves and potentially everyone back on Earth. Can we remote pilot the ship from the shuttle? Weaver asked. And just like that, my moment of glory had already collapsed, and I could feel the color drain from my face. The communication systems aboard the Arkham had never been fixed, and now it was too late to attempt any repairs. We can't, not from the shuttle. We have to pilot the ship manually, which means... Weaver cut me off and finished my sentence himself. One of us will have to stay behind. Of course, there was always a catch, a price to be paid. My search for the ultimate questions of the universe was what led me here, and now it was only fitting that I be the one to stay behind and witness the end of my journey. You go in the shuttle. I'll stay behind, I offered selflessly. There was no hesitation. So many of my questions had been answered, and though so many remained, I no longer wanted the answers. No, you have to go. I expect him to say that. I was just about to refute him, but he stopped me. He grabbed my shoulders softly and looked deep beyond my eyes, into my very soul. I turned on my heel and ran as fast as I could into the loading dock. It had become easy to navigate the ship by this point, so I was on board and beginning my own launch sequence within minutes. I watched as the Arkham faded quickly into view, marveling one last time at Dr. Bigham's creation. I still didn't know how he created the black hole engine and had no idea where to start. I could only hope and pray I would live long enough to find out. I began activating the engine and particle accelerator, then charted a path far out into the Proxima system. I couldn't leave without making sure Weaver had succeeded. The titanic gravitational pull from before was much less intense given the smaller size of the shuttle, but still strong. Piloting had not been my strongest area of training, but I handled the shuttle easily enough, much to my astonishment. When the jump drive disengaged, I turned the ship back around to face Proxima Centauri, which was now little more than a fuzzy red dot in the distance. The distortions from the entity and lensing effect could still be seen as well, only on a much smaller scale. I waited, and waited, and waited. After a few minutes, I began to fear something had happened to the ship and was ready to drive straight into the star myself. But then, it happened. Without any warning, an enormous burst of light shined like 1,000 burning suns. I shielded my eyes as best as I could and waited. There was no sound, no vibrations. I was much too far away to feel anything. But as the light faded, I was finally able to see it happen. The black hole was now sucking the entire mass of Proxima Centauri into the event horizon, and from the looks of it, the entity as well. The space and time distortion spiked for just a second, before warping inwards and towards the singularity. The rest of the red dwarf began to spread around into a bright accretion disk. Before now, Proxima had never been visible to the naked eye. But within 4 years, it would be one of the brightest objects in the night sky. I waited for what must have been hours. I had to be sure. I needed to be certain it was dead. Nothing emerged. No more distortions. No detection of the anomaly. As far as I could tell, it had crossed the inner horizon and was now being shredded to its most basic particles around the singularity. It was only after I was certain it was gone that I felt the first sign of relief since I had woken up. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. Though I'm sure if you were listening, you could have heard me crying. I sobbed, screamed, cursed, yelled. It came out all at once. The floodgates opened, and I couldn't close them. Afterwards, I sat in the cockpit and just stared out into space. Since I was a kid, I'd always seen it as the final frontier. A never-ending fountain of questions, just waiting to be solved. But now, I know the truth. Some things aren't meant to be discovered. Some questions are better left unanswered. After wiping the last tears from my face, I began plotting my course back to Seoul. Before I was about to engage the autopilot, I thought of the mammoth journey that lay ahead of me. There were 1,000 things that could go wrong. What if this shuttle had been damaged somehow during the assault? What if I died in hypersleep like Dr. Bigham? I couldn't risk not leaving behind a record of these events to show the people of Earth what Weaver, Roberts, Torrance, Sidney, Stanton, and Dr. Bigham gave to protect them. It will be my greatest failure should this message not reach you. I'm broadcasting on all radio frequencies and sending this message through all channels. My only hope is that someone, somewhere back on Earth, finds this before they find you. My name is Damian Blair, junior astrophysicist and the last survivor of the space research vehicle Arkham, and I'm coming home.